Welcome to the show. Before I get into this week's conversation, I want to reiterate what I said on last week's intro about people who have asked me about making a one-time payment to the podcast. Although Patreon doesn't exactly allow for a one-time payment option, there is a workaround. Subscribe to the Crude Patreon and then cancel your subscription once you've received an email confirmation that your payment has been successfully processed. That way, you're only paying the amount you've pledged for 1 month. You can do this as well as subscribe to the Crude Patreon at www.patreon.com/crude magazine. That's patreon.com/crude magazine, and pick the subscription tier that works for you. Okay, on to this week's episode. In this one, guest host Whitney Branshaw and I have a conversation with retired Marine and pararescueman Roger Sparks. In 2010, Roger was part of Operation Bulldog Bite 2 Charlie, a heavy firefight with insurgents in the Watapur Valley in Afghanistan. The fight was, as Roger puts it, surreal. He talks about how, after the fight, he was in such disbelief that he checked Wikipedia for proof that the fight actually happened. For his part, he was awarded the Silver Medal, one of the highest awards for valor in combat you can receive from the United States Armed Forces. Okay, time to give the Crude Company men a shout out. These are the people who have subscribed to the Crude Patreon for $50 or more. Trina Duber, Seward Brewing Company, Crystal Liska, Derek Adolph, Blue and Gold Board Shop, Sharon Liska, Carly Mortensen, and Alaska Surf Adventure. Thank you to all the Patreon subscribers. This podcast wouldn't be possible without you. Back to Roger Sparks. After a 25-year-long career in Special Forces, Roger is now a tattoo artist and author. It's taken him a long time to be where he is now, with the understanding and the self-analysis that comes with soul-searching. His perspective is a reflection of a life spent in uncomfortable situations, be it as a Recon Marine, an Air Force pararescueman, or a tattoo artist. Because, as he puts it, if you're risking virtuously, it leads to better and more things. So here he is, Roger Sparks. This red light right here, it means we're recording.
Okay, fired up.
Crude conversations. Listen more, then you talk.
Go to work!
Time flies when you're having fun.
Time flies when you're having fun. Welcome to the show, Roger.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we started recording, when I was setting up and you and Whitney were talking, you were talking about swimming with great whites with Laird Hamilton.
Yeah, this stuff just falls out of my mouth sometimes. So I don't even know how we started talking about that. What were we talking about? Swimming. You're going to Bali. You're going to Bali. You are going to Bali, yeah.
Talking about the Bali trip, yep.
But yeah, so that's kind of like the end of the story, I guess, in some way, that I'm shark diving with Laird Hamilton, you know.
Okay.
But there's many other great, kind of not celebrities, because I wouldn't, but and to be honest, like, I don't know who any celebrities are. I mean, I've met A-list actors, and I was like, oh, okay, that's that's who that is, or but if they don't have context to me, it's like I'm not really starstruck. Like, I don't feel like you can starstrike me, and I mean, I live in Alaska. I don't watch TV. I just wake up early and do push-ups out in a field. It's like I'm a really simple kind of guy, but I do get all of that culture. But I tell you, man, doing the shark diving thing, I knew I was shark diving, but I was only told, hey, man, you need to get a room at a hotel in, on the border of Tijuana. And you're going to hang out, and we're going to pick you up, and we're going to go shark diving. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I literally didn't know if we were going to get on, a boat, or we're going to do this like on a liveaboard, or what the deal was, or if we're just going to take, are they chumming the water and we just do day trips? Mm-hmm. And I know that's a very loaded statement. I went shark diving with Laird Hamilton. Yeah, because there's so much more to it than that, But I was given the hotel address on the border of Tijuana in a specific time, just to be outside drinking coffee. And I did that. It's like the first day I kind of got there a little early because, when you fly from Alaska, the time is always screwed up to where you're going. You're either really early to what you're going to go do or you're really late. You're going to be jet lagged, because everything's a red eye, and so, but I got in and, I've spent a lot of time there. I was in the Marine Corps, and as a young Marine, I spent a lot of time, California, Tijuana border there, and so I went and got me some street tacos. I was hanging out, and I was enjoying it, because in Alaska we do have kind of Tex-Mex, I love Serranos, man. Props to those guys. But it's like, I grew up in Fort Worth, in Dallas, Texas, and so. Tex-Mex is like the staple of my life, but I love going down there and eating like Cali Mexican, like Tijuana street food is amazing, And so I was eating chow, and I showed up and I'm standing there with my shitty, Best Western coffee, and I'm waiting, and all of a sudden, man, a brand new like Range Rover, like Land Rover pulls in front, brand new, man, and it was like a color like I can't even explain. It was like a orange, but like a pearl orange, just way out of my class, just pulls up right there. Didn't even have license plate, and this guy pulls up and I'm like, man, who the hell is this? Cause they came up real close to me, kind of blazing. Window rolls down. It's Laird Hamilton. And he's like, hey, are you Roger? And I was like, yeah. He's like, get in. We're gonna go drive to Encinitas, Mexico, and we're gonna go just hop in. And I was just like, what the fuck? And so
okay,
you starstruck me, man. And I remember as a young Marine, or hell, even before then, like whenever I was like in high school, seeing what was it, that cheesy ass movie North Shore?
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
The lamest kook movie, but it kind of explains the whole kind of reverse racism, the locals hate, the white dudes. But then years later, I'm always kind of like trying to find these iconic spiritual guides in my life. And I remember reading, there was like an Outside article, like when Outside magazine just came out, like they did one on Laird, and it was just him living, in Hawaii and all this crazy workout stuff that he was doing. And I was like, that dude's a badass, man. I'm like, there's something about that cat. And I just kind of put it away, and I'd always glom onto different dudes like Mark Twite, these badass alpinists and stuff, just kind of try to figure out what those dudes are about and start doing whatever they're doing. If you want me to ice climb in my underwear, with no socks, whatever it is, like, I'll go do it. I'll figure this stuff out, because I've always tried to kind of push myself physically to where it's metaphysical to help myself learn about, things within me or, just within my world. And I like finding kind of like role models or like these spirit guides, with that. And Laird is definitely one of those cats. And so it was just freaking nuts, man. Like I knew I was going to go shark diving. I had no idea it was going to be with Laird Hamilton, but everybody there was just, really badass, and they were doing research for PTSD, visual based stimulus. And we were basically a couple weeks out on a live up board and just experiencing the metaphysical, spiritual aspect of being with those animals, in the water under their circumstances, in their environment, and that was really empowering. It was really a cool experience.
What did that look like to be among them?
It's weird, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I know you guys got a list of questions, and I'm happy to be here all night if you want to ask them and edit the shit out of this thing. I really don't care, but it's there's something subtle about, putting yourself in a place that's uncomfortable. It's really powerful, I think, to put yourself in uncomfortable places intentionally. Interestingly enough, we were talking about saunas, like doing really hot Finnish saunas. And,
earlier when we were here.
Yeah, and ice bathing. Mm-hmm. It's called contrast therapy. And Laird turned me on to that too. But it was in such a very sincere way. Like it's one of the, when you have someone like stop you and look you right in your eye, like 6 inches from your face, and say, you need to do this. And they're not saying it because they're projecting themselves on you. They're saying this because they genuinely care about you. He was like, you need to start doing very hot saunas mixed with ice bathing. And you need to do it like almost every day. And I'm like, okay, and I just kind of planted that seed. So the same benefits of shark diving, there's carryover to ice bathing, right? Like, you can tell me about the physiological things, right? There's measurables to all those things. You can say, well, like diving with sharks, you're going to get, massive adrenaline spike. Your heart rate's going to go through. You can measure all those things, but the very subjective things are where things get really interesting. The gray areas of life are the things that are very interesting, So, well, what that does now is that empowers you. You faced a visual stimulus of fear. Like, you truly felt like you were going to die, but you faced it. And you interacted with it in a way that empowered you. Same thing with ice, right? Like, you can say there's physiological benefit to that. You can say there's, it's going to increase serotonin, of your brain. It's going to reduce systemic inflammation. It's going to activate brown fats and neural chains and all these things. It's going to do all that stuff. But I think there's a very subtle and powerful ceremony in physically facing something that's very uncomfortable. And I think that is the real benefit of these things. Like when people exercise, it's not, they're not going to get abs of steel by doing that, but it's empowering because they're kind of pushing the edges of their mortality slightly. And I think that's the draw to it. That's the benefit of it, I think, But yeah, complete digression for a start of this whole interview is, but you brought it up.
I did.
you brought up the whole, going to Bali, and I was like, oh, surfing, and click, click, click. My brain's just going a million miles an hour.
Well, the surfing thing for me, it 100% scares the shit out of me because I grew up on the water on boats. And so the way that I learned about water was that it's a way to sustain, like to have respect for Mother Ocean, right? So I never really played in the ocean much because that's how we made our living. And then I started doing the board tide, and the board tide is super freaky, but it's super fun. And I kind of got the bug and got my kid involved and was doing all these really interesting things with surfing. And that's, going to Bali is facing a huge fear for me. Like, I'm fucking terrified that I'm going to die there.
Have you ever
I'm like, I don't want to. I'm a strong swimmer. I was a varsity swimmer in high school and swam all my younger years. And I know myself in that sense, but I am quite scared, but in a really good way, like I'm excited. Scared.
Yeah, you should be. Yeah, but that is like a pilgrimage, right? Like
yes.
it's a pilgrimage to face this specific fear.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
But that's, like when you're living virtuously, like if you're risking virtuously in that way, like it leads to better and more things. It just keeps, I feel that's why I'm sitting here talking to you guys. It's like
100%.
Just the real subtle virtuous risk,
Yeah.
What do you think is the importance of being brave?
Well, I think that if you want to consciously be brave, it's not going to happen. I think that courage is desperation. I think that, like let's just take a kid that's abused, right? And he puts a stiff upper lip every day and he goes to school and he does his stuff, courage is something born out of desperation. Same thing with men in combat. It's not that I'm courageous, I'm just scared of other things, And so, we're all acting out of these odd things. So I guess, being brave, if you want to use brave as an analogy of just what we were kind of talking about, of like putting yourself intentionally in uncomfortable places, is that brave? There's a really good author that I read, Tim O'Brien. And Tim O'Brien's, he wrote, the things that they carried. I think some high schools, kids read that, which that's pretty.
I actually have a question related to that book. It's one of my all-time favorite books.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely amazing. And he wrote a few really great novels, and they were a cathartic experience for him to write those about, living through his experiences of Vietnam. He was an Army infantry. I think he wasn't a lieutenant. He was an enlisted guy, I'm pretty sure. But obviously the things they carried is really wonderful because it delves into not only the physical things that a guy's carrying, but the emotional things that people carry from those experiences. But he wrote "If I Die in a Combat Zone." There's a whole chapter on bravery, And I think it's On Courage is what it's called. And when I read that, at that time when I read it, I became very enamored with it. And I was in a position within, as a pararescueman, that people would kind of have to appease me. Like if I told you to read this, well, then you need to read it, and I'm going to ask you questions about it. And I literally printed that out on a Xerox, page by page, and then made like 20 copies and gave it to everybody in my life. And I was like, you need to read this. And most of the men that I gave that to, they had experienced very surreal combat with me. And so I just think that, the words that Tim O'Brien wrote about on bravery, he kind of uses the analogy. There's like a water buffalo out in the middle of this field, and a platoon had been ambushed and stepped on mines. They were in the specific area that these guys were beyond themselves, and they were kind of at a point of rage, and they saw. This was a free fire zone, specifically where this water buffalo was. And they saw that there was 2 boys out in the middle of this field. And these guys just opened up on these boys and this water buffalo. And so he just sat there in horror and just kind of watched it. And he just sat down watching what was happening, but you could hear the men firing at the boys. And then he specifically talks about the impacts of the rounds hitting, the water buffalo. And then he's like, is the water buffalo courageous because it's standing there? Are the boys courageous? Are they cowards? Are the men that are shooting at them, are they courageous? And I just thought that was so powerful, because what is really there in that moment is desperation. And through my experiences, I kind of see this stuff constantly, and I think that I found a lot of healing in the words of like the 16th and 17th century samurai. They wrote a lot of different things, and they believed the more desperate a person was, the more valuable they were. And that's very true. I mean, think about it. Like, when have you been the most effective in your life? It's when you are the most desperate you've ever been. You get shit done. When you're out of your mind with desperation, and whether it's emotionally, physically, all those things push you to a point to where you're extremely capable.
You have something to prove.
Yeah. Well, but you need.
Okay.
You need necessity, whether that's safety or belonging or, but I mean, that's an interesting point that you bring up right there, Cody, is to prove to yourself, something. And I was thinking about that as I was working out this morning. I wake up really early, I take care of my son, I get him to school, and then, this morning it was 15 degrees and I'm out there, running and doing push-ups and bear crawling for like an hour and a half out in the field behind my house, and looking at that almost full moon. It was really high in the sky.
Beautiful moon.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about desperation. I was thinking about who I am. And I was like, at some point when you get comfortable, you seek being productive. And I was like, well, what am I uncomfortable with? And I think a lot of people who are very highly functioning people, they have a lot of self-loathing. They're doing things out of I'm never enough. And I definitely feel that with myself, and that's a subconscious thing. It's again, like, you can't consciously do this. All my life I've definitely felt that I've been weaker, less intelligent. I've just been extremely hard on myself. And I read a psychotherapy book years ago, and it was talking about there's 2 types of people that blame others or the situation, or there's people that blame themselves. And the people that blame themselves, they become very highly functioning people. But the thing is that there's a malleability to us in our character, just like steel, right? So it's like if you're too hard on yourself, where you're just destructive to yourself, But if you can kind of temper that with a soft, yielding steel and a hard, brittle steel that's sharp, well, then it's like, that's very highly functioning. But that takes a certain amount of living, I guess, to become that aware, I think. But I was actually thinking about that running this morning. I was like, I don't feel like I have anything to prove to myself, but I feel like I need to taste blood every morning. Like I need to push the edges of my abilities in some way. But that just makes me feel like I'm alive. And if I don't, I feel like I would go insane. And I'm not working out because I want to look fit. I don't want to, I'm not working out towards a goal. It's completely process oriented. Like I'm going out there just to taste blood and stare at the moon when I taste it, to feel alive, to feel my heart ripping through my chest,
How long did it take you to get to that point?
I guess to the point to where that I feel like I don't have anything to prove.
Mm-hmm.
Man, probably just, I think it's different for each of us. And I think that there's layers to answering that. There's not like a myopic, answer to it, because there's layers. There's, we have all these different hats. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm an artist, it's like we all have these different things that we associate with, that are responsibilities in our lives or that we kind of place upon ourselves. But I think to always be hungry, I read something, I'm always reading stuff and just taking little things away, like fall forward, like always overextend, always, have your reach exceed your grasp, like always just fall on your face, because that's growing. It's when you're comfortable, you're not living, it's cool. We're at a good place right now, and I could get really comfortable, but I don't want to, not to keep throwing cheesy analogies out there, but, what was that on, Shawshank Redemption? Get busy living or get busy dying.
Yeah.
And you see these people. Well, what is living and what's dying? In living, I think it's taking risk. It's taking, whether it's you're trying to take safe risks or you're taking big risks. It's like that Zen proverb where you jump and the net appears. You have to take the risk. We can't see what our tomorrow is, but you have to scare yourself a little every day. I tell my son Oz, I'm driving him to school, and Oz is 15. He's got cerebral palsy. He's nonverbal. He's got type 1 diabetes, but there's 100% home. He's 100% loose. He's like a unicorn, Mm-hmm. And I tell him every day, I'm like, Oz, what's the 3 rules? And we're just driving, to school. And I'm like, do something that scares you every day. I'm like, meet a new friend. Go meet somebody you haven't met. Do something that scares you. And I was like, most importantly, say hello to the ladies. And he's like, right on, Dad, right on. And it's like, it's that simple, but we can get comfortable, I think, with who we think we are. I think that, I could be comfortable where I am right now. I retired from the military about 1.5 years ago after 25 years of service. I just finished writing a book. I'm in a successful organization called Force Blue that takes special operations combat veterans and repurposes us to do marine conservation.
What does that mean?
Basically, they take combat divers, guys with, I kind of came in, I'm kind of like a plank owner of this thing, but I can talk as much or as little as you want, but basically the Force Blue organization, it's about the power of dichotomy. Think about when you envision in your mind as I'm speaking, like a special operations combat veteran, combat diver with a couple decades of service doing those things. You think of that person, and then now let's go and switch that, and you think about a marine conservationist. Well, that's a pretty strong dichotomy. But that dichotomy really works. Like marine people in marine conservation are very dedicated to what they're doing. They're very selfless people. And I think that, the situation with, combat veterans, specifically like special operations combat veterans that are combat divers doing all these things, they're pretty selfless people. They were not doing that for the t-shirt. Mm-hmm. A lot of guys do get involved in that to prove to themselves they can do it. But especially with today's day and age, man, you're a hooker turning tricks. You're really going to see the tiger smile. If you do that job for a career, at least 20 years in the military, you're not doing that for your ego. It's a 10-headed dragon. We all get our egos associated with what we do. I think through my experiences and a lot of the things that I've tried to articulate to people with whether, the podcast, that we're doing now or writing the book, all these things. It's like, I would hope that allow your experiences to help you get past yourself, because we're all human beings. We're all fallible. We're all good. We're bad. We're ugly. We're all those things, but we're human beings. And the saints are the sinners that just keep trying. Like, you have to get up every day and try to do better than the day before, And again, that's all subconscious things, people that, they do get comfortable, and I think they get complacent. And I think that maybe is the opposite of bravery, just getting comfortable, And that could be doing a career, like hiding behind a career, People that get into, say, can use the analogy of special operations, it's like, well, if guys do that for 2 decades, well, then they can maybe go get really cool contracting jobs or something like that. But it's like, damn, bro, you didn't grow enough from that stuff. Why don't you go get a job gardening or something? Like, go to P&M Gardens and get someone to teach you about something you don't know anything about. It's like to try to get past yourself, and allow those experiences to change you. Allow your ego to dissolve through your experiences. Where I've been the last, year or so is my cup is running over so much. Like these crazy experiences with the shark diving, with the marine conservation stuff, with the book. And I haven't tried to do any of this stuff, man. Damn, man. I don't even know where to begin, but all this stuff is like falling in my lap and wiggling. Mm-hmm. I didn't try to write a book. That was all synchronistic. It all pretty much starts with Bulldog Bite, combat in November of 2010, surviving those experiences. And then within 24 hours of that, meeting Casey Neistat, David Kuhn, and Scott Campbell. That Carl Jung, he's like a 60s philosopher, kind of like an Alan Watts cat.
Very familiar, yes.
Yeah,
one of my favorites.
Yeah, this is great stuff. Yeah, and he said something, I'm going to butcher this, but basically he was talking about synchronicity or serendipity. And he was like, serendipity exists when you have unprocessed events happen and you're projecting meaning upon them. So you're like, that's because God, or that's because of whatever you want to throw in there. That's because of, God has a purpose for me. That's why I didn't die. For you, and I know you got a bunch of questions, but I'm just talking, man.
No, this is great, man.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is how these go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your eyes, you give me the bedroom eyes, so I just got to. And I'm sorry if I'm not looking over here at you, Whitney, because
actually, this is so organic and perfect because this is like.
Were you supposed to be the Jeff? No, were you supposed to cool me down?
No. What? This is I think Cody, you're probably seeing our faces in the sense of like we've kind of been on these same journeys of like trying to getting over yourself is kind of a thing, right? But this is like therapy for me, just listening to you talk and share these experiences. Like I'm keep it coming, Roger.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, so talking about the, synchronicity, serendipity, Carl Jung, the whole, just forcing, reasoning upon erratic events. But in 2010, you cannot explain that away to me, man. The most surreal combat that I ever experienced in my life, or that I think that human beings can experience. Take it to the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. Even when, the combat that we see now is very highly technological. You can separate yourself from it with a video screen, or you can just call in an airstrike, or, we can project much more violence than we could when we were cavemen, but I don't think that anyone can experience any more violence than we experienced that 8 days.
And what you're referring to is the operation called Bulldog Bite 2 Charlie, correct?
Yeah. So Bulldog Bite 2 Charlie was an operation that took place in Afghanistan in 2010. It was in the mountains on the border of Pakistan, Afghanistan. Really high altitude. We're talking to an Alaskan crowd, but it was, the mountain ridges there, are significant, and
if I remember correctly, I watched the Lionhearted documentary earlier today, and you said it was the Watapur Valley in Afghanistan, correct?
Yeah. The Watapur Valley is the specific area, and if you have military people out there listening, it's just north of Asadabad. Everybody calls that just ABAD. That's a FOB, a forward operating base out in Afghanistan, like very high northeastern Afghanistan. Very mountainous terrain, much like kind of like the Chugach. But everybody is really angry and they want to kill you, you know. Mm-hmm. And they were basically going to do known raids of insurgent training camps. So kind of like insurgent ranger school is held in those mountains where they train the militants out there. And this is not even contested area. It had been years and years since even coalition forces had gone in there. And so there's it's kind of like gang wars, you know, like, and we wanted to go put a gang of our thumpers in there just to let them know that we exist and we want you to feel us. And basically their mission was to go move to contact with these known insurgent training camps that are in the area and locate munitions. And if military age males want to fight, well then, you know, let's fight to the death, you know. And so they landed these guys high up in the mountains, like at 10,000 feet, and they were going to patrol down to the valley floor, which is like 3,000 feet. And they met staunch resistance. The first day, the first mission that was flown, Alaskan Jimmy Settle, which was a pararescueman that I was in charge of, who was there, he was shot in the head. And the situation was so dire there. I mean, I can get as little or as into it as you want, but over that week-long period, 11 men were killed and 49 were brutally wounded. And that's just coalition forces. But myself and 8 other pararescuemen and Pavehawk rescue crews pulled all those guys out. And that was an 8-day period.
I wrote this down because I grew up hunting, so I have some frame of reference. Never been to war, but I understand bullet sizes, right? So you said there were soldiers coming in with 50 caliber bullet wounds. That's a big bullet. Yeah,
and so and again, you know, this was to the point to where things were surreal. You know, it wasn't okay. You know, it's a troops in contact. You know, we're gonna shoot at each other a little bit. This is people getting overrun, like a 101st Airborne platoon getting overrun, hand-to-hand fighting, and they call us in to get their wounded and dead out as this is taking place. And so we're calling in airstrikes as we're flying in. I mean, there's already rounds flying in the same space that the Pavehawk's flying in. And we fly in there, and this is, you know, every 3 hours, day and night, you know, hoisting in. There's nothing flat there. And to make matters worse, everything was usually above 7,000 feet. And so at those altitudes, we couldn't have the bulletproof flooring in the helicopter. And we're also weight restricted with fuel. We never try to weight restrict with ammo. But everything's limited. And when we're coming in there, we commit to it. And you hoist down and you're getting shot at the whole time that you're doing this. You're very exposed. And when you get on the ground, it's literally guys missing their arms, dragging their dead buddy to you. And it was very, very surreal. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you get back and there's bullet holes all in the helicopter. The hoist cable you're riding in on is getting shot. Just very, very surreal. Like it's metaphysical. It's not like you can't, oh, well, this is a 50 cal and this is a 308 round and this, you know, but they were firing, the enemy set us up every time, you know, they owned it. You know, these are mountain fighters, you know, and our boys, even though we're good, you know, the guys are in shape and they're motivated. Guys are quickly pushed past their resolve, you know, and their intentions, you know, they're pushed past themselves and panic overtakes people, you know, and you know, these guys are running in sandals, you know, carrying crew served weapons, but our guys are carrying rucks, body armor, radios, ammunition, food, fuel, clothing. And, yeah, it was a pretty rough week, but I think the whole point that I was trying to make by bringing that up, I know if you want to put a tack in it, we can come back as much as you want, but
keep going.
I think the point that I was wanting to make was, we'd experienced that. And this was, I mean, I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg, you know, and I mean, we left that week and we landed. We went back to our main base, which was it's kind of like flying in a helicopter from Fairbanks back here to Anchorage. It's like a 2.5 hour flight back. And this is after that whole 8-day period. I mean, I was covered in, feces, blood. I mean, brains. We were very, very beside ourselves. It's like when you resound yourself to kind of die and you don't, and then it just kind of keeps happening for about a week, you're just kind of on this weird autopilot and guys get interested, especially in today's day and age, like everybody wants to be a voyeur to the peep show, everybody wants to kind of take pictures of shit with their smartphone, put it on fucking Instagram. And it's kind of a weird thing. I mean, for everything we gain, we lose, and that happens in combat too. Guys will pull out their fucking smartphone and take pictures of shit, of a dead body, of a bullet hole, of round fragments in their helmet, blood all over their uniform, or, holes. I mean, I remember guys were taking pictures, and I thought that was very appropriate, taking pictures of the battle damage. Like we'd come back and there's holes all through the fucking helicopter, chunks missing out of the drive shaft or the tail rotor of the helicopter, stabilizers, like a quarter of it blown off, or we crashed it into the side of the cliff trying to get these guys, the props, the main props of the Pavehawk, they shatter when they hit stuff and they come back and all of them are gone. I mean, the props hitting shit,
and somehow, like the helicopter is still in the air.
Yeah. I mean, guys' weapons getting shot. You take a fucking picture of it. And I think that's just part of our culture of who we are now. Mm-hmm. But I'm kind of like one leg in, one leg out. I grew up, in the early 70s, so it's like, I get it, but I don't. And that's one of the things I struggled with. And I think that's what we all struggle with when you experience surreal things. Mm-hmm. It's like you need tangible proof that things happened. And a picture's a way of quickly capturing something that is subjective. It's an objective proof of something subjective. And I think that guys do that. And at some point, if you do experience violence continually at that rate for an extended period of time, you stop taking pictures. And now, at some point when you stop documenting or you stop being a tourist in that space, that's where we were. It was not fun. It was not cliche. It was not like, holy shit. It wasn't like, let me show you what I experienced. That was yours. You just fucking took that in the gut. Mm-hmm. And you cannot process that.
Do you think that that's when cognitive dissonance kind of kicks in and you start using, like Tim O'Brien says, euphemisms, right? A burnt soldier is a crispy critter.
No,
right?
Yeah. So, now you're talking about, I mean, I know what you're saying, but you want to disassociate. You want to disenfranchise from the emotions of it. Sure. That's where the crude humor comes in, but I think this is even past that. I think kind of like what you're kind of mentioning there is more of just it's just an oddity that happens.
Okay.
Like if you want to go kill a specific culture of people, you have to evilize them. Mm-hmm. You have to belittle them in your mind. They have to be less than human for you to do that. And I think that those things are kind of a way of just kind of surviving within the moment. But I think that we were, kind of like what I was touching on there. It was just, we were no longer tourists. Whatever we were seeking, it was kind of scary because you had found it. And, I think some of the really great analogies are, like you've seen the tiger smile, or, it transcends itself a bit, and it's not.
And what does that mean? See the tiger smile?
I think that, in my weird mind, it's metaphysical. Like you're turning something into something else. Like we're really going crazy here with this conversation, but like Jimi Hendrix playing the guitar, right? He's doing something with that transcends itself. And it's a specific, it's a metaphor for itself. Like it goes beyond what he's actually doing, you know, and can a tiger smile? Probably not. And so, you know, just kind of place that analogy on it. Like it's doing something that it's you're Alice and you just fell through the wormhole. You know, it's a Cheshire cat, you know, the tiger smiling, it's a Cheshire cat, you know. So it's just something that you're applying emotion and reasoning to something that isn't emotional or reasoning, you know. But as human beings, we project our emotions and our thoughts onto things to try to solve those problems. And I think that's what a lot of, you know, specific trauma-related PTSD is. I think is you're associating, you're trying to have a conscious solution for something, like a pragmatic solution. I got back from those experiences, and one of my buddies that hadn't experienced those things, but he was a close friend of mine. I actually just tattooed him yesterday, but he says, Raj, it's not your fault. And I'm like, I know it's not my fault, you know. And he was just trying to help me grieve. Years later, he got into a car wreck with his son on Turnagain coming back from skiing at Alyeska. Rollover accident. His young son was in the back seat, restrained properly, had a big, tough-ass bullshit truck. Head-on collision. Rolled, you know, real bad wreck. And when everything stopped, he was upside down, the windows were smashed out, and all he could do is hear his son moaning in the back. And I was like, it's not your fault. You know, it's like, you're going to blame yourself, right? But you can say to yourself, let's say like you're in a car wreck and everybody in your car dies but you, and it's all your loved ones in the car. You're going to blame yourself the rest of your days. I mean, you could call that survivor's guilt or grief, but it's a little bit more than that, because it's like you're trying to reason with something that's unreasonable. Like, I mean, do you want to say that was God's will? Is that what you're going to project to it? Well, that's fine if you do. I mean, there's no wrong answer there, but that's the broken record. That's someone that's experienced trauma or violence replaying that over and over and over, because they need to try to find a logical solution to why they lived or why those things happened. And combat is like that, right? So combat, things are happening at a rate that you cannot process. You cannot process what's happening. And you live the rest of your life as a broken record trying to make sense of that. And I think that anybody that's experienced these things, that, you know, they're just nodding their head. Yeah, man, you know. And there's a lot of cool techniques out there, you know, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too much. I'll let you ask questions.
No, I actually want to hear the techniques. And honestly, you are actively answering my questions before I even ask them. So you're on a roll.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's the micro dosing.
I'm not trying to jump in, but I do. We're working with people. I've been a nurse for 10 years, and I did 5 years as a psych and substance abuse nurse, and I ran a opiate program at South Central Foundation, and I grew up in a family that experienced substance abuse. I didn't experience violence growing up, but I did later in life as an adult with my significant other and my child. And it's kind of an interesting, like, what frustrates me the most, and then thinking about the people that I've worked with that suffer with a lot of trauma, is that the effects of that and the involuntary changes that happen to you feel, I guess the best way I could put it is very unfair, because you can't get away from those things, right? But it's like but when we're talking about combat or something like that, you put yourself there, right? Like and so it's kind of like, how do you, it's voluntary but involuntary, and then how do you reason with it? I keep hearing you say that, and that resonates with me, because it's like, sometimes there just isn't reasoning with it. You have to find a way to move through it. Yeah. So you can just be up every day, like you said, you know, tasting blood and feeling alive and looking at the moon. I mean, that's kind of when I think about is, how do you face yourself and the rest of your life every morning?
Yeah.
You know, it is a weird space to be in.
For sure. Yeah. When you were talking, I was actually thinking of what we spoke about earlier about, you know, blaming others or blaming yourself, you know. I mean, I know, you know, through my experiences, my younger son, when he was 4 months old, went to wake him up from a nap, ended up doing CPR on him for about 20 minutes. And so he's got an anoxic brain injury. So he has cerebral palsy. He's nonverbal now. And, doing that, like doing CPR on your child for that long, I mean, I did not do that, but I can only blame myself, right? And so it's like, I don't blame that situation. I'm blaming myself. It's like we always work within that space. And again, this is a whole lot of counseling, a lot of inpatient treatment facilities for me to come to the understanding of that I can just talk about this like I've just mapped out my inner psyche. But a lot of the rescues I did as an Alaska pararescueman were really pushing it. And now that specific situation that happened with my son, Oz, when he was younger, that was right as I completed pararescue training. And I also had a horrific back injury during that same time. And so recovering from the back injury as well as coming to grips with my son's disability are one and the same. But I mean, it's overwhelming. And as I look back on it now as a pararescueman, pushing the limits of everything, I mean, I grew up in the gray area, I mean, I grew up, really understanding that truth is in the gray area of things. But, I mean, like if the minimum altitude for a parachute deployment was 2,000 feet, but in Alaska, the weather brought us down to like 1,000 feet or something like that. I mean, let's do it,
What kind of work were you doing as a pararescueman in Alaska?
I mean, the work as a pararescueman in Alaska, you're basically on alert to aid, people in distress, people in mortal stress in Alaska. And
Search and rescue, right?
Doing search and rescue. And thanks. I just kind of...
That's okay. I just...
Looking way beyond there. I want to get right into the nuts and bolts. But the Air National Guard in Alaska holds an alert posture. And it always averaged out. Again, I was up here since 2004. It's 2019 now. So, for, well over 10 years, I was a pararescueman up here, and it averaged right about 52 to 57 rescues a week. I'm sorry, not a week, but a year. So like one a week, basically. Mm-hmm. It always averaged to about one rescue a week. And now some months you might be completely dry, but it's going to make up for it, all the rescues were somewhat seasonal, if it was hunting season, climbing season, tourist season, all the rescues would kind of like go down that checklist. And to be honest, 90% of those rescues were saving them from the environment of Alaska. But 10% of those rescues were like, no shit, like I need to intervene, give you an airway, or do very invasive procedures to you in the back of the helicopter to save your life. That was about 10% of them. But in all of them, we saved them by just getting them out of that environment,
Does any of those 10% stick out in your mind?
Yeah, there's a few. Like I said, I mean, I just finished writing that book, Warrior's Creed, and mm-hmm. I cataloged quite a few of them in there that I wrote about. I'm trying to think about some that weren't in there. Yeah, so there was one. This is Red Devil Mine, and a young boy. A young boy had tried to commit suicide with his father's hunting rifle, right into his face. I stuck it right under his chin and pulled the trigger. It was like a 308, I think. And now this was like in February, man. And it was 2 a.m. when we got the call. And we have different alert postures. And I don't want to it's kind of boring to get into the semantics of a lot of the stuff. But we took off within an hour. We're flying to him. But that usually from point of injury, like the time of injury, it takes us about 4 hours to get to that person. And so we all know about the golden hour. Basically if someone's, mortally wounded or critically injured, they have an hour to get it into the surgical team to start, in the operating room before they're just going to die. Like Darwinism is going to sort them out by the time we get there. Mm-hmm. But we got there, and this 16-year-old boy had shot himself. And it was really interesting because, we can take off, people that live here in Anchorage or Fairbanks or the bigger cities, like you really become inoculated that we're in Western culture. But a large portion of Alaskans live very, very rurally, completely off grid. And I mean, people think that, oh, we're Alaskans, we're all tough, but there's very different Alaskans. People's Alaskan experiences, differ wildly. And I'm very thankful to have seen the highs and lows of that. I mean, just as a pararescueman, I mean, we get called out, it's always the worst day of someone's life. But I mean, I've spent, quite a bit of time in Barrow, out in, the Diomedes, Nome. I mean, I've been all over, I've seen it all. And I meet people, on the worst day of their life, and so it's a very human interaction,
What happened to that 16-year-old?
Yeah. So, again, he had shot himself in the face, and there's a lot of Alaskan isms to this story. Right. And so we're flying there, and it's 2 a.m. I'm dead. I'm just so just dead tired. I mean, we worked a full day. Again, I'm a husband, father of 2 young boys at the time. And when we're on alert as pararescuemen, I mean, we still train really rigorously, ice climbing, skiing, doing rope rescues, turning, diving, doing all this stuff. And we don't let, just because we're on alert, slow us down. And we had a full day of stuff. And I was really exhausted. And we got the call at 2 a.m. We go and hop in the helo, we take off, and we do multiple aerial refuelings to get there. And so when we take off, there's a C-130 and there's a Pavehawk. There's PJs on board the C-130 in case they need to jump in. And I just happen to be on the helo. And most of the missions are dealt with by the helo, but if the person's going to die, before the helo can get there, the C-130 is much faster. It can get there on quickly, and the PJs will jump in, sustain the casualties, and then they're met with the helicopter. And so I was on the helicopter, but as we're en route, I'd never drank an energy drink.
Lord.
I'd never drank an energy drink, and I'm, mid-30s, really strangely good shape, but I'm dead tired. And my buddy shared a Monster, like a full can of like cotton candy Monster or some shit. And I drink this thing, and literally I'm like ready to fight everybody in the aircraft because I'm just so excited, And anyway, we landed, but we couldn't pinpoint the location of the exact cabin where the young boy was at. A guy was talking to us on a ham radio, and he was letting us know that he knows exactly where the boy is. He happens to be the principal of the school that all the kids in the villages go to, and he's going to meet us at a remote airstrip with some dog sleds and dogs with people to get us. Now we're going to land the helicopter, get in with these guys with snow machines and dog sleds. They're going to take us to the remote cabin so we can treat the kid, because
There's no other way to get there.
Yeah, and this was like a 3 or 4 hour flight, one way to get to the location. And I'm totally butchering the story. This is just a story that's standing on my mind. And so, but we get there, and I'm the junior PJ, the junior pararescueman, so I'm the acting medic. And the senior pararescueman, his job is to like figure out how we're going to get out, and I'm just treating the patient. And so, but we get there, and there's no electricity in the cabin. There's a raging fire. It's a wood-burning stove, like an old wood-burning stove, like turn-of-the-century wood-burning iron stove. Mm-hmm. And so it's not some nice, Harvia cool stove. I mean, this is was welded out of, an old Buick or something.
Yeah.
You could, as soon as you came in there, I could smell burnt flesh and feces, And it's a small cabin. This is a proper remote Alaska cabin, the doorway, like 3 feet high kind of deal. Mm-hmm. And this is after this planes, trains, automobiles to get there. I go in, and I hear a woman wailing, and this is an Alaska Native woman wailing in the corner. And there's no electricity, so the only light is the fire that's burning in the wood-burning stove there. And I've got a headlamp, of course. I've got it on because we've been this crazy-ass story to get to where they're at. And I notice the woman immediately wailing in the corner, and she's wailing. And she's speaking Yupik. And I look down at the boy, and the boy is in his underwear, like cotton whitey-tighties. And his face is gone. I mean, completely gone, but he's holding his face, and he's rolling into the wood-burning stove. And so that's what's causing the burning smell, is he's physically rolling and burning himself against the stove. And then one-room cabin. At the end of the the small cabin there, his father was in the bed with like 12 wild turkey bottles around him. And he's half holding one and just like mumbling to himself. And so I jump on the kid and I start treating him. I tried to intubate him because our protocols, when you're a paramedic or anything within medicine nowadays, and hell, most all trade jobs, it's like this just protocol. I'm going to do this, they're going to do this. And because they do this, I'm going to do this, So I'm just kind of going down that protocol. And it started out where I stick an ET tube, an endotracheal tube down his airway.
You intubated.
Yeah, I went to intubate him, but he had no lower jaw. He had, he just had his tongue. And so it was really neat, but I intubate him and then he throws up coffee ground blood all over me and he's fighting me, pushing me off of him. And again, I mean, like, this is the rubber meeting the road. This is not like clinical medicine. So it's like this dude, yeah, sure. I need to secure his airway, but he's been waiting 4 hours for me. He's got an airway,
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, bro, man, I'm totally sorry, man. I'm like, can you hear me talking? And I realize he starts using sign language to talk to me. My son uses sign language because he's nonverbal. And so instantly I'm like, holy shit. And I start saying everything that he's saying and he gets really excited that I'm speaking what he's saying. And that was really powerful that we just instantly connected. And so I basically just gave him an IV. I'm like, hey man, I'm going to give you some funky monkey. You let me know when you feel better. And
Take
so,
the edge off.
yeah, I start snowing them over. And a lot of times, I don't want to get into the medicine of it, but you snow people over. And, I definitely did that for him. And that mission, we had to get him on a snow machine. Like I packaged him up, got him on a snow machine, got him out to where my partner was out there chainsawing the trees down around this cabin so we could land the helo to get him in the helo. And this is cold as balls, man. I mean, whatever the ambient temperature at Red Devil Mine is in February, that's what temperature it was at 2 a.m. It was freaking cold.
Yeah.
And so he was an underage minor, so we had to bring his father. And his father was a worse patient than he was because now his father's just drunk as hell, and inebriated. And a big guy, like an obese, large male. And so we had to get all that in the back of the helo. Because of the urgency of the situation that it was a minor, that we went back out to the runway. They landed the C-130 out on that remote runway. And this is all at 2 a.m, man, in February. And we transloaded from the helicopter to the Herc and got him there. That stands out in my mind. That was a significant mission. Years later, a buddy of mine did a jump mission to that same boy that tried to commit suicide again. So we had saved him and obviously his home situation hadn't improved, and it's not all doom and gloom out there. It's a beautiful Alaska. It's a beautiful culture. The native culture there is just beautiful. And there's an amazing, depth to that. That mission definitely stood out in my mind. And I think where the difficulties of the cultures, and I don't even feel right speaking in a public forum about, Western society, injecting itself into primitive culture isn't even the right term, but to native culture, that causes a disparity that I don't think was there before. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and it's like
yes.
They were doing fine before us, but you start bringing Taco Bell and TVs and shit and
wild turkey.
And so it's like the youth of that culture. It's the fuzzy, crispy, sugary thing. Of course you're going to stare at that. You want to know about that. I want to go to Anchorage. I want to get out of here. I don't care about what you're saying to me. I don't care about our culture. There's this fuzzy, tasty, warm, crispy thing right in front of me, and I need to go figure this out. And I think that's the inherent risk of Western culture into native indigenous cultures. Many native indigenous cultures, I have more respect for them than our own culture. We provide technological advances, but we're by no way have it figured out.
Respecting
nothing
nature.
And nothing is sustainable in the way that we live our lives, even like we were talking about saunas and stuff. Every indigenous culture on earth knows the benefits of exposing yourself to heat and cold. And so now it's like, us with our CrossFit and shit, we think it's so awesome that we're doing this stuff now.
Yeah.
It's like,
They've been doing it for thousands of years.
yeah.
You would not last in a sweat lodge, bro. You just would not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And Alaska, native, again, the wisdom is there. And I've just been on the periphery in awe of witnessing that, up in Barrow, watching them whale, do different things. That's amazing cultures that I could not fathom or exist there. That's way past me, man.
When speaking to that young boy, he was obviously suffering from depression. He was suicidal. Those things exist in every culture in the entire world.
Yeah, sure.
Well, and being a healer too, like the gift of healing, like when you were talking about, you realize that he could communicate, bounces me back to my medicine where it's like, listen, like I'm an ally here. I'm your friend. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm only trying to help you.
Yeah. Obviously he's doing that out of desperation. Then all of a sudden, my active job is to save his life and to attempt to heal him, to balance him in some way, but I'm immediately connecting and communicating with him. That's a powerful thing. That's step one. That's step one, right?
Get him on the same side.
And but I don't want to go into rabbit holes, but I love that about the job, that there's no posturing. It's all very necessity. Again, it's desperate. Like we were talking about the desperation of that. He's obviously desperate, but I'm desperate to try to help him and to connect in that space. It's sustaining, but it's fuel to a fire. And I guess I was wanting to finish my thought with that, but doing all those crazy rescues as an Alaska pararescueman, I was trying to save my son the whole time. Every patient that I've ever touched, I was subconsciously trying to save my son Oz from an anoxic brain injury, and so that's subconscious. That desperation is there. So, you want me to jump out of the aircraft at 1,000 feet and the chutes are only safely rated to 2,000 or 3,000 feet, I'm fine, because I'm desperate. Like I'm already as desperate as you are, and you're dying in a tree, freezing to death, waiting for me to get to you, and I'm as desperate as you are, But that job shielded me from my thoughts. It kept it subconscious. And then whenever I retired, I was forced to try to understand those subconscious motivations, because now I'm not doing that. But it's kind of tricky because now I'm tattooing people. And I know it sounds silly, but tattooing someone as a tattooer, we all project different things, but now it's like I'm still a pararescueman. And I'm doing something that you need. Like you're coming to me because you want me to articulate something for you. So it's very almost, I feel like this like shaman healer in some way. And I'm just this dirtball tattooer, just like trying to learn the trade, right? I'm trying to make a buck. But at the same time, subconsciously, what I'm drawn to is one, recreating what Scott and Casey and David did for us in Afghanistan. Right after that, we get to that. We'll have to come back to it for sure. But I'm also projecting those same things as a healer. Like my patients in pain, I'm touching them and I'm doing things to them. It's very much so like I'm putting a chest tube in you in the back of the helo. I'm strapping you down. I'm giving you ketamine. You're willing to go through this pain because you might be just some young coming to age kid and you want a cool tattoo. But most of the people that I've tattooed, they've either sought me out or they're friends that are pararescuemen. They're other special operations guys or other combat veterans that want me to tattoo them. And they realize the significance of having that other person that's tattooing them understand their experiences. And it doesn't matter what the hell I'm tattooing. I'm not the greatest tattoo artist in the world, but I'm connecting with them in a very sincere way. And I'm not just doing it for the money.
How'd you get that start? How'd you start tattooing?
Yeah, that's a great place just to stop me, and I can go back.
I apologize. Were you gonna?
No. So again, Operation Bulldog Bite 2 Charlie. We experience what we had experienced. I was talking about that. We were talking about the surreal combat. We came back and we had landed, and we'd only been back for like 24 hours. Like literally, I still have, cake, feces, blood. There's brain matter in my helmet that's not mine. Surreal stuff, and I'm completely grief-stricken. I go into our compound and, there's blood caked all over my weapon, and I look at the pictures of my wife and kids in my little ready locker, and we're right on the flight line. I mean, like the helicopter's 20 feet, and I'm right there at my locker. And we call it the opium den.
I like that. I don't know why, but I do.
But and I was in charge of the guys there, and I just kind of gave like honeycomb hideout, you know, like opium den, whatever, you know. So it's funny little terms everywhere I go, you know. And but I look at the picture of my wife and son, and I'm just on all fours crying, you know. And we get a knock on the door. I mean, literally like knock, knock, knock. And I open the door up, and there's a public affairs officer, and we're in a very secured spot. Like, I mean, that's like top secret clearance stuff, like where we're at right there. You know, I mean, there's Predator drones driving by with Hellfire missiles on them, like 10 feet from our door. You know, I mean, it's a really controlled spot, and we're right there, fully armed, cutting. You know, we have mohawks for haircuts. You know, nobody. You know, it's like we're very unregulated right there, and we're just doing. We call it like the business end of freedom. Like we're right there. You know, and knock on the door. So we open it up, and there's a public affairs officer and 3 gentlemen that are obviously civilians. And but they were our age. I mean, they were cool cats. Like I could tell right away that they were cool cats, you know. And they're talking to us, and they kind of pitch their idea. They're like, "Hey, man, you know, we want to make a documentary about special forces guys right from combat, tattoo, and we want to tattoo you and make a documentary about it." And I'm like, the fuck, you know? But
that's what I'm thinking. I'm like,
no,
what
I'm
the
like,
fuck?
but I'm like, that's kind of intriguing, but that's just fucking weird, and it's weird in a way that I'm just going to listen to you for a second. And again, I've kind of Forrest Gump my way through my life, and what I mean by that is I just stumble into really weird shit all the time. And one of my friends as I was growing up is Oliver Peck. He's a tattoo artist. He's on the show Ink Master. I never in my life ever would have. I mean, I love tattoos. I was, you know, I had a lot of tattoos at that point, but I mean, whatever, right? Who gives a shit? And, but this guy, Oliver Peck, who's like the judge or host or whatever of like, Ink Master, you know, but he's a really cool cat. And he had tattooed me a whole lot. He learned tattooing on one of my best friends. He opened his shop, and my best friend built the whole place out for him. All the counters and everything in Elm Street Tattoo are still made by my buddy. You know, It's all still there. And he's tattooed my mom. So, I mean, like, that's the only person I know that tattoos.
That's great. He's tattooed your mom.
Well, yeah. And that sounds really weird, but I mean, whatever, right?
Yeah, I get it. That's awesome.
But so this guy who's somewhat, I guess, made it in tattooing, I guess is my point, is the only point of reference I have for tattooing whatsoever. And so I just asked the tattoo artist. I didn't know who Scott Campbell was. I didn't know who Casey Neistat was. And this is before I think both of their careers really exploded. Like Casey blew up in the whole YouTube world. But this is before all that, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I'm talking to the artist. I'm like, "Hey, man, so do you know Oliver Peck?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I know the Pecker. I've worked down at Elm Street." And so because I'm just like, I don't know. And I hate dudes that play the fucking name game. Like, I'm just like, "I know Oliver. Do you know Oliver?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I know Oliver." And instantly I'm like, all right. I mean, just by his mannerisms, but there was something very interesting too when I first met these guys. So they're just looking at me. And again, I mean, like, I'm literally covered in shit and piss, blood, cum, brain matter. Some mine, some other people's. I mean, just really a mess, you know. And I mean, I haven't showered in over a week. And I mean, I'm so far fucking past myself. Like, I'm just now coming home, you know, and this is right after, you know, all that fucking sodomy, you know, and just beside ourselves with horror and rage and just all of it. And we have 3 days, and then we're going to go back out and do it again. We have 3 days, and we're going to go back out, but we're not really off. Like, as a pararescueman, or when you're doing combat search and rescue, like, you go back to your main base, but we're still getting called out. But this isn't that type of combat like I was talking to you. It could be, you know, we could get RPG'd, crash fucking helo, whatever, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, but that's kind of routine to us, you know. But whenever they were telling us the original idea outside of the opium den, they're like, "Hey, so blah, 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 we want to do this documentary." And they're looking at me, and I can tell Scott Campbell and Casey Neistat are kind of like going back and forth. They're kind of like looking at me. because here I am, like they're face to face with what their desires are. But I am like their loss of innocence, you know?
What do you mean by that?
Like I personify their loss of innocence. It's kind of like, hey, let's go see a fucking donkey show in Tijuana.
You're the guy to suggest that.
Well, you know, just for instance, like, hey, let's go fucking see this. Isn't that be fucking cool?
Yeah.
And then you get there and you realize
It's not that
it's
cool.
fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's I was thinking. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, this is what
Yeah.
you thought you were after, but it is not
Yeah,
as
and-
easy or as fun as you think it's going to
Yeah,
be.
and so they're face to face with the reality of what intrigued them. And so like I'm a manifestation of this loss of innocence. And I could see that. And this is just me reflecting on this stuff. I mean, at the time it was just this weird feeling. It was just like, let's fucking do it. You know, it was just because what that was, and this is just me in reflection, is that was a very human response that they had. And I was really past human emotion and responses at that moment. And it made me come a little bit closer to myself. It made me come home a little bit just to see the reaction, for me to realize that I'm so far fucking gone that I represent this to them. Like I am this 10,000 yard stare to them. And that was powerful because it was like, okay, well, recognizing that is the first step to coming back. And if you want to there's nothing more intimate, I mean, other than sex with someone that you love, right? Or, you know, playing with your child. There's nothing more intimate than someone fucking tattooing you, you know? And I think, again, the synchronicity of this shit is fucking spooky, man. Like I'd never experienced combat to that level, nor do I think human beings can experience things beyond that. I mean, that's it. Once it goes to the surreal factor, that's it, right? And it's just survivor's guilt or grief after that, you know? Like you all got blood on your hands, you know, at that point. And then now to have these fucking guys standing in front of me wanting to tattoo me, I was just like, fucking, whoa, man, okay. And I had the ability to say, no, fucking beat it. Mm-hmm. But it was that human reaction. I was like, okay.
Come on in.
Yeah, come on in. And so, but I'd be like, hey, public affairs guy, you're not allowed in. So just like, go get all their shit and fucking bring it here. These guys are with us now. And they stayed with us for 3 days. And Scott tattooed the fuck out of us in Afghanistan.
What did he tattoo?
Well, he tattooed everybody pretty much with just different shit. And so that was his kind of human experiment. It's like, what the fuck are these guys going to want? But now again, just to kind of back up and put things into perspective, there's a lot of people in the military. And I would say out of 100% of people in the military, less than 10% do the fighting. Less than 10% do the fighting. Of that less than 10%, let's go ahead and say the people that make a career out of it, special operations guys, let's say the 2% of that do that. They make their whole fucking career, their whole adult life is spent doing that. And so you're kind of like in a subculture within a subculture within a subculture. And you're so far fucking gone, man. Like when you land in Baltimore and or you're on the airplane, everybody's like, hey, everybody, we have some people coming back from overseas on board. And you have like that young Army private wearing his uniform. That's not the guy I'm talking about. I'm talking about the guy that's over in the corner in between his fucking Jack and Cokes crying because he just feels like he just let everybody fucking down, you know. That's who Scott wanted to tattoo. And so again, that's less than 2% of the fucking military. And now he's face to face with it, you know. You know, there's fucking Predator drone live feeds fucking doing target hits on the TV next to him as he's tattooing us. You know, like he is as close to the reality of projecting violence as you can be, you know. And so that's fucking spooky too, that he just blundered into us. They were about to give up on their project because they had a bunch of fake press passes and they planes, trains, and fucking automobiled their way to
I was going to ask,
Afghanistan.
how did they get there?
Yeah, Casey did a whole film on it, and he's
How did you get in there?
But these guys are men of no means by no means. Means of no means. How's that go? It's like a means by no means.
Okay.
Like they make shit happen. They're the magic makers. And again, they're desperate. Like, so why is Casey Neistat a great fucking YouTube vlogger? Because he's desperate to fucking articulate something. Why is Scott Campbell such an amazing fucking artist? Because he has something to fucking say, and he can't say it by speaking, right? So it's like there's a desperation there. Those guys were just as desperate as fucking we were. And he's looking in my eye, and he's just like, God damn. But they were this fucking lightning rod. But so all of those things are fucking bizarre, man. To link up to that moment in Afghanistan, doing that at that fucking time. And for like 3 days nonstop, you know, like I got my son on my chest, my son's names with sparrows on my chest, you know, which is a pretty fucking cliche tattoo, but like I didn't care. And that's the interesting thing about a tattoo, right? Is it makes things that are subjective or, you know, just something that's intangible, tangible. Like I can feel it when you tattoo me, and I can look at my fucking chest and realize that you tattooed me. That's pretty fucking magical. And so I was beside myself. Like I think that night, again, this is less than 24 hours from events that I was awarded the Silver Star for. The guy I was with definitely, you know, 4 guys died in my arms that night. You know, we were able to save 5 of them and get them out. But this is like 24 hours from those fucking events. And you have these guys meeting me and tattooing me. Now, so they did all this shit. They tattooed us. That night, as Scott's tattooing us, I pull up on Wikipedia. And again, man, I'm not big. This is like literally the iPhone just fucking came. This is 2010. What was it, like fucking 10 years ago? That's crazy to think about, right? But it's like, that was the iShuffle. That was before the iFucking phone, right? Yes, that's when you had an iShuffle was cool, right?
Yeah.
And so I look up on Wikipedia and I look it up, and no shit, man, there it was, November 10th. Or November 14th, 2010, Operation Bulldog Bite, the heaviest fighting, November 14th, blah, 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 11 killed, 49. The facts were still a little bit fuzzy, but they're just, however they fucking get their info, who fucking cares, right? But it was proof. I felt like Steve Martin in The Jerk, where he rips out the phone page, my name's in the fucking paper, I'm fucking real. You know, it's like it was real because I could read it, and it's so fucking stupid. But it was because I'm hurting and I want to validate my hurt. I want to understand that this was real, or is this just like, I mean, maybe if someone was like fucking, you know, raped, or if someone was abused physically, like you want to know that's fucking real, you know? I couldn't bring myself to shower for like 3 months. Cause I'm like, I need to fucking feel, I would need to know this is real. And it was just a subconscious, it was weird shit, you know? And, yeah, so they tattooed us, and I mean, that's fucking real. I could look at it, you know.
You could feel it too, actually.
Yeah. And I mean,
physically.
and a lot of people say, you know, and I don't even want to digress, but you know, I tattoo at Eagle River Tattoo, and 1 out of every 5 people I start tattooing is like, I like the way it feels. This is my therapy. And you're like, you know, hour 5 of this, you're not going to like any of this shit. You know?
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, you know, it's like no one likes tattooing, but they like the experience of. And what I think they're trying to articulate is that specific thing, right? It's bringing something that's intangible, tangible. You know, whether it's an emotion or a thought, a feeling or a projection, symbols and promises. That's tattoos, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the feeling of projecting something, and it's only as good as long as you are alive, you know. And so that's powerful medium, you know. But anyway, so they tattoo us. It was really fucking crazy, and they left. We went right the fuck back out, you know, and this was so dire, like we were literally making like hoistable body bags to put live people in so we could save a minute underneath the helo when we're hoisting people under fire, you know, and they saw that we were doing all this shit, and we have so many resources at our disposal. I mean, like we have riggers and people that are sewing shit with the best fucking nylons and shit right there. Cause I'm like, we need this right now. And so they're fabricating it right fucking then. And this guy's tattooing us. I remember one of the most poignant moments that, again, allowed me to kind of stay holding to myself. Jimmy had been shot in the head. He wrote a book, Never Quit. And that's how I met Don Reardon, and we wrote Warrior's Creed. Like I said, I didn't ask to do any of this shit, you know. Mm-hmm. And so Jimmy was shot in the head, but we didn't evacuate him, you know. The round got lodged, the Spalding from the round got lodged in his fucking skull, like on the external portion of his skull. And so we just sewed it shut, and he got up on the horse and just kept going, and so, that's where we were. And it was funny because Scott was like, what happened to your head? Because Jimmy's got a big fucking bandage on his head, right? And he's like, I popped a zit. And then, because now that's that macabre humor, right?
Yeah.
Because he's facing the fucking dragon, every fucking day. In fact, I think he flew out on a mission for a Marine that got blown up, stepped on a mine or something. Right then he came back. He's like, where'd you guys go? I just heard helicopters and shit. It's like, oh, nothing. He's like, what happened to your head? He's like, I popped a zit. And then he was like, just 20 minutes later, he's like, hey, what happened to him? It's like, he got shot in the head a couple days ago. And I remember Scott, it was just like, God damn. Or he's coming back and there's blood all over guys because he's tattooing us, but there's no day or night when you're doing this stuff. It's just, it was even more surreal. I mean, it was just fucking weird. Like, NBC, Lester Holt and all these fucking guys showed up and, because they were going to do some kind of feel-good Thanksgiving Day with the troops thing, but they just happened to do it with us, right? Because we're kind of a sexy commodity. We got helicopters and fucking weird gear and shit. And, so Lester Holtz wants to go fly with us, but we were just like, fucking, I want to hang out with these dudes, and so.
Yeah.
You're like, Lester, next time.
And the guys hit it off with them, man. The guys hit it off with them, but it's just kind of like they want to ask these canned fucking questions, and it's just like, bro,
yeah,
I don't even know what the fuck you're saying, and I mean, we have a lot of latitude. We have a lot of rope we can hang ourselves with, especially where I was in pararescue at the time, like I'm in charge of, that specific group of guys. So I was like, hey, let's go fly you guys around, and me and a couple of guys made it all happen. And so we flew Casey and David and Scott around in the fucking helo, hoisted them up and down. I mean, cause it's just like, we just experienced the most intense shit that anyone can experience short of, doing CPR on your fucking kid or something,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm just like, hey, Cyclone, can we fucking fly these guys around? Everybody has nicknames. He's like, right on, fucking Anvil. Let's fly these fucking guys. And that's the pilot. Just get the fuck in. Let's go fucking fuck off.
No rules at this point.
But I mean, we're just beyond it. This is apocalypse. Yeah. This is apocalypse now, man. This is not. It's just really far gone.
Yeah.
We're way up the fucking river. So yeah, they do it. They leave. And then they're gone, but it was like, fuck, I can look at my tattoos. I got tattooed, man. And, we had a few more months there. All of us were pretty fucked up. I mean, just to realize how far gone we were, I think the base was getting a rocket attack when it was our time to go get on the C-17. And we just drove right through it. Like everybody hunkers down and gets in bunkers and shit. And we're just driving. The C-17 that we're supposed to get on got, rounds through it or something like they do weird shit. They do like kind of like mortar fire with RPGs, try to fuck stuff up on the airfield. But we're just tossing bags in the back of the bird as all this stuff's happening. We were cooked, man. Our banana was so fucking fried. Difficulties came. We came back, and as an Alaska pararescueman, there's only 20 to 30 of us at a time, and it takes 10 any given 24 hours to hold that alert status. And so when we were hot racking it, like half of us as Alaska PJs are in Afghanistan, half of us are here pulling the fucking Alaska state mission. And so when we got back, those guys were already there. So we had to pick up the alert immediately. And I mean, I think I had like 3 days off and I was right back doing rescues in Alaska. And it's just like, there's no time to process that shit,
or even begin to like inventory, like how do you
there's no fucking way
start? How do you even heal? Like there is I mean,
yeah. And it's like you get the canned fucking, like we would come back and you do the in processing briefing, and these people like, again, less than 90% of the military really sees that stuff, and when we just make a job out of it, not okay, I'm going to see that here, I'm going to see it here too, I'm going to go deal with plane crashes, families fucking dead in the fucking back of a plane and in a fucking frozen lake, and that's, I have 3 days off from the Afghanistan stuff to this stuff, and so, there's no processing it, there's just absolutely no fucking processing any of it. And that's where the real problems begin, because it's just, you just can't, and you realize that you're kind of far gone. I realized I was far gone, I was sitting in my living room, which is just 20 feet away from where we're recording this, and I was watching Forrest fucking Gump. I use the Forrest Gump analogy.
Yeah.
But I'm watching Forrest Gump, and I mean, like, how many times have you seen Forrest Gump? You ask
that
any
movie.
middle-aged person, you say a dozen? Fuck, I don't know.
Yeah.
A dozen partial times, maybe all the way through twice. But I mean, it's like, how many times you fucking seen that? You know? And I'm watching it, and I've got my 2 young boys with me, and I'm back from Afghanistan. And I'm having a good time, and we're about to shower. It's like 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, and I'm just sitting there watching this, you know. It's back when we had cable, right? Now everything's internet, right? But we're watching it, and there's a combat scene that comes up where it's raining, and then it just stops raining. And that's very fucking realistic, like the way that the sounds and the percussiveness of the RPGs and stuff that are going by. And it fucked me up, man, instantly. Like, everything kind of tightened up on me, and I started, like, just tears started coming out of my eyes, and I couldn't help it, but I'm holding my 2 sons. Like, I'm literally fucking one arm around one son, one arm around the other one, man. And I came out right to where I'm sitting recording this, and I just went fetal on the garage floor and just started crying. And I was like, and my older son went and got my wife, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. You know, knowing full well, like, fuck, man, Forrest Gump should not fucking do that to me, man.
Like, I'm in trouble. This is not good.
And I tried to get help, you know, I tried to get help, and, you know, the military does what it can do, you know, but I think the problem lies in that percentage that I was throwing out. Like, less than 10% really see stuff, you know, like I was explaining, and then less than 2% really make a job out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, but those 2%, they're the tie hookers, man. They're the guys that are always on the clock. And, fuck, man. It just, so the military tries to solve the problem with awareness and discussions. And then you just get all these people that almost like fucking posture like they have PTSD, you know. Anyone can have PTSD. If you think your life isn't being threatened and things are happening beyond your control, that's PTSD. Your shit is happening to you that you will not process. You're going to have to actively try to process that shit. That's and that can happen to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But combat-related PTSD is a very misunderstood thing, I think, with the general public. I think that far fewer veterans have it than the public thinks. I think that a lot of veterans have adjustment issues, a very difficult adjustment from their military life or their deployment to readjusting, like readjustment issues. It's not PTSD. But, and I don't want to minimize, and I really don't want to minimize anybody's experiences. But, I mean, I've been through all the treatment programs there are. You know, I've been to Chris Kyle. I've gone through all the behavioral health or mental health people that the military can throw at me. And all of them helped in specific ways, but, you know, it just takes time. But more importantly, I don't want to minimize anybody's story. I mean, anybody can have post-traumatic stress disorder, whether they deployed or they haven't deployed. I mean, like I said, you feel like your life is threatened and you are being forced to do things that you cannot control. That is the recipe for PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, you know, I reached out and I went to behavioral health at the time. And the woman, I could tell that she was versed in behavioral health, in clinical psychology, and specifics of psychoanalysis that I don't care to study. I could not help myself at the time, but I realized within 10 minutes of talking to her that she could not help me. Someone has to have experienced something very similar to you to help you through it. I mean, that's the same thing in Zen Buddhism, right? Like being a bodhisattva. That's what healers really are, is they're bodhisattvas. Like they acquire energy and experience to help others up to the point that they're at. Mm-hmm. And that's what really good therapists, specifically behavioral health therapists or psychotherapists do, is they are just this muse to help you get past even where they are. And so, because they have intentions of why they're doing it. Why do they want to be a healer, right? Because they want to maybe prove to themselves that they can help others. Helping others heals yourself. There's all these different things, But I don't want to minimize anybody's experiences. But I've seen it all, I had a lot of difficulties. I knew that she couldn't help me, not because she wasn't a good person, but her experiences, I think, were more directly tied to maybe sexual abuse or domestic abuse. And I was dealing with surreal, physical trauma. And I wanted someone to help me unpack this. And one of the things that the military specifically uses to deal with this stuff is what they call cognitive behavioral therapy.
CBT.
Yep. And a lot of times what the military docs in general, they lean towards, and you might be able to help me, Whitney. But it's where you just tell your story over and over and over.
Exposure therapy.
Exposure therapy. But that's difficult, and I don't agree with it. I've gone through it. So basically, like, imagine if you were a woman and you were raped. Well, let's just have you tell your story every other day to me in a different way until you get desensitized to that. I don't think that exposure therapy is the right way to go for trauma for people, And I did go through months of it.
Are you maybe thinking of EMDR?
No.
Okay, you're not even there yet. Okay.
No. EMDR is the ticket for me.
And what is that?
EMDR, what's it specifically stand for? It's basically
EMDR it's the rapid eye movement desensitization.
Do you remember the EMDR itself?
It's the E.
Who cares? Everybody just look it up later on your phone.
But EMDR is incredible. But
so
it takes a long time to get to the place where you can actually do the EMDR. Like, in my personal experience, it took me a year and a half of talk therapy to create a safe space in my mind that I was ready to go there. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes they do it very differently though.
Yeah. I mean,
welcome to EMDR and we're doing it.
Yeah. Right there's as many flavors under the sun as there is ice cream. I mean,
yes.
And even with that, it has to do with, the relationship between the therapist and the client. Or you pulled it up. Was
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Thank you.
Yep.
EMDR. So basically, the way that I explain this to people, and this is just I am not a psychotherapist, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn last night. So, but just, it's really benefited me. I really think that EMDR is a way to go, for many reasons. But basically, when you are dreaming at night, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you remember your dream, but then you get up to go take a piss, drink a glass of water, go let the dog out or some shit, and then you go lay back down. You don't remember anything about your dream. You don't even remember where to begin your dream. That's where EMDR is beneficial. Because remember I said I was experiencing things that I couldn't process. So all of those moments get stuck in my head like a broken record. I can't process them. They're just there. So obviously sights and sounds are programmed into those sensations, thoughts, and memories. The scream of the helicopter, right? That scream of the turbine, that every time I would hear that afterwards, I'm just seeing people ripped apart, or I'm blaming myself for grief every time I'm in the helicopter with that screaming sound. Cause, I've sat on men that have died in my arms in the back of a stuffed helicopter with that screaming turbine. Feeling like their blood and, their feces cold up against my skin, soaking through my clothes, It's like, so like those sensations and those things are forced into a memory capsule. And anytime that any peripheral sensation comes up of that, I immediately go to that grief moment. Mm-hmm. And same thing is like if you remember your father's cologne and you remember the loving warmth of your father. Like that's the same fucking thing, or the perfume of a beautiful woman, It's the same thing, It's just those are unprocessed moments or processed moments. And so what EMDR allows you to do is, in a waking conscious state, access those memories that have not been processed. And so they do that through eye movement, eye movement, blah, 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 EMDR. But basically, as your eyes are moving back and forth, it simulates the left and right aspect of your brain. That's why whenever you're in REM and sleep, it's going into that state within your brain. And so it's forcing the subconscious and the conscious mind to meld. And we can really go down a rabbit hole, literally, if you want to, with this stuff. But the same thing when we were talking about microdosing psilocybin. That's the exact same thing. So what does serotonin and psilocybin do? They are mixing the conscious and the subconscious brain. Any plant-based medicine, whether it's, CBD, THC, psilocybin, all these things that we're kind of coming out of the dark ages with as far as evilizing these things, because of political beliefs and shit, but they have a place, and they have a place for creatives. Like I deal with it every day in a creative space, trying to use creativity as a commodity. Judgment is the lack of creativity, right? And so anytime I'm trying to be creative, if judgmental conscious thoughts come in there, it just fucks up the whole recipe, so even Benjamin Franklin thought about this shit. And so obviously all those guys, they were way into the cannabis, right? But they would also do these other techniques that are very similar to EMDR. Benjamin Franklin, the great fucking inventor of all these fucking things, Thomas Edison, they all use these specific techniques, but one of them was they would hold these steel balls in their hand and they'd move them around, and all night they would think about a problem. And whenever they would drop them, because they were falling asleep, they would wake up and they would remember what they were thinking about, pick up the balls and keep thinking about the problem. So they're effectively just doing EMDR with those same things, I've found, quite a bit of healing with EMDR. One of the things, we can get back to the spooky side of all this shit. There was a therapist that I was seeing, and she's a brilliant therapist. I was lucky enough within pararescue, we have this like unlimited budget. So we have our own strength trainers, fucking hot tubs, massage therapists, shrinks, everything, And so we outsource everything. And we ran into Dr. Carrie Elk of the Elk Institute. And she was known within many of the elite within special operations to be the psychotherapist, And the military wants to invest money in this because they can get more money out of us. They can get more longevity out of us if they fix us, And so
they take care of you.
Yeah. So we developed a thing called HPO, Human Performance Optimization, just fancy wording for keep our guys healthy and doing the job. And so we basically outsourced Carrie Elk. She's a wonderful woman, and she did a therapy session with me that's EMDR. And she doesn't want to look at you doing this. She's like, just look at my hand. And you're just sitting there just like you are, and you're just following her hand. And she's like, think of this thought, this trauma, think of that. And she does that for about 30 seconds. And then, what are you thinking about now? And you just play a game, And at some point, if trust is in the relationship and you feel safe, you kind of lead yourself down this subconscious rabbit hole. It might take a bunch of weird turns, but you just trust where it goes, and it's going to end up somewhere pretty fucking interesting if you just kind of hold on. But she's extremely effective, and she's helped many, many, many of my teammates as well as other, special operations combat vets, and just throughout the gamut. Any combat veteran, she'll treat them for free if you reach out to her. And
if I'm understanding that correctly, it's like a stream of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
So you'll start with maybe a traumatic memory, and then maybe that'll
lead
for me,
I mean, just use my story that we've talked about, blaming myself for my son's anoxic brain injury. Hold that. We do that. Next thing you know, I'm in a fucking trench with a guy ripped in half. Next thing you know, I'm wrestling my dad. It's like there is someone at the controls there. I just can't put them all together. And that allows you, for instance, during the time that I was doing all this EMDR, I was trying to separate myself from the military. And I was at a point in my career, I had like over 20 years. I had like 22, 23, 24. I finished with 25 years in the service, but I was at the point of trying to recreate myself. And I was trying to recreate myself as a tattoo artist. And in a very simple way, I was trying to recreate myself, trying to recreate the healing that Scott, Casey, and David did for us and the men that I was responsible for. I wanted to learn to do that because that was the most healing fucking thing that ever happened to me after those events, short of spending, time with my loved ones, So, all these things, so I'm sorry, I kind of got lost in the sauce there. But So I'm trying to recreate myself as an artist. I'm tattooing myself, my friends, with the help of Scott and a wonderful family of tattooers, the Yarians, Deborah Yarian and Don Yarian that own Eagle River Tattoo, and their whole family of tattooers.
All their kids tattoo on.
Oh, it's just,
it's incredible.
It's crazy, but all the synchronicity of me meeting them and just all that is just really bizarre. But the point I was trying to make is like, I'm obsessively painting roses. I mean, whenever you are a new tattooer, let alone an old tattooer, you obsessively paint things to try to figure out things. You know, you're just kind of articulating a language through pen and ink. A lot of times you do this with watercolor because it's very like tattooing. It's cheap and it's very like tattooing in a way that it's permanent. It's intentional when you're doing it. Blah 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 blah. And I'm obsessively, and I don't know why. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm obsessively painting roses bathed in moonlight. And I can't fucking explain it. And it's so obsessive to the point, it's like Close Encounters of the Third Kind with the mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
Like I'm just fucking doing this, man. I could show you archives of these fucking roses and peonies and blah, blah, blah. Florals bathed in fucking moonlight. Just fucking ate up with it, man. And I was doing an EMDR session with one of the docs on base. And it's like, where does this take you? Boom, we stop. And then you talk a little bit, you hold that thought, and you keep going. And we get to a point, and he's like, where does this take you? And I'm like, I'm almost trying to make some shit up so we can just keep going with this. But I'm like, I just say whatever comes to my lips. And I was like, a young Army guy in Bulldog Bite crawled to me, and he'd been shot through the abdomen with a 50 cal. And this is middle of the night. This is like midnight, full moon out. And I lift up his shirt and it's pulsing venous blood out of his abdomen. And he's just telling me he's cold. And I just fucking went pale white because that was the rose. And that's fucked up, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? I could have gone a lifetime of fucking obsessing with roses. But after that fucking day, there's no obsession with fucking painting those. I understand the connection of why I'm so obsessed with it because I'm trying to understand the beauty and the horror of that. Like that guy fucking died right there. And it's like, he's talking to me and I'm looking at that and he's just telling me he's cold. You know, it's just fucked up, but that's EMDR. That's the power of EMDR. But so now years later, I'm still being treated with this brilliant psychotherapist, Carrie Elk, Dr. Carrie Elk. And she's doing this thing and she's like, and she knows me pretty well now because I've somewhat become a face within pararescue and helping call the need for the HPO program, the Human Performance Optimization Program, that's getting these psychotherapists to talk to other young pararescuemen and being very outspoken. Like I'm going around the world pretty much and telling my story of Bulldog Bite. Not only of the intense nature of it, but of the meanings that I've found from my experiences of doing a career within special operations. And she says to me, just candidly, she just stops everything. She's like, Roger, I have never met anyone so unwilling to accept mercy, love, or grace in their life. And I was just like, fuck. And so the reason that meant so much to me is because Scott Campbell, Casey, meeting those guys and them tattooing us when they did, I never felt like I was their friends. But what was funny is like every time I'd go and visit Scott and Casey, they would roll the red carpet out for us, man, put us up in a loft in Soho, have us meeting, you know, A-list stars, tattooing us. And I mean, Scott Campbell, he's like $1,000 shop, you know, minimum. You want me to put a fucking dot on you, $1,000. Mm-hmm. You know,
I love it.
And I mean, people are fucking stacked for him to do that dot, you know. And he's just like, I want to fucking tattoo you, man. I want to enable you in your life, any fucking thing. Let me help you. And I was really unwilling to do that. And as a PJ, you know, we go all over the world and we have to do all these medical currencies. I was in New York and Scott owned a studio at the time called Save Tattoo in Brooklyn, New York. It's a pretty high tier tattoo shop. I mean, you know, some of the most skilled, dedicated tattooers in the world go through there and are a part of that family. So it's really, to me, it's like the mecca of tattooing.
Like a pinnacle, yeah.
And there's a Deb story I've got to tell you that's fucking spooky.
I know all
gets
about Deb's weird New York shit, but yes.
But this gets even spookier with the Yarians. It's just fucking creepy. But I'm out there. We were doing cadaver labs. You know, we have to do a lot of what we call wet tissue or live tissue training. Sometimes we do them with animals. Sometimes we do them with humans that will reanimate with fluids to treat them and do traumatic amputations, all kinds of training. We're doing this in New York, in Manhattan. And on my time off, I would go and be somewhat mentored by Scott Campbell at Save Tattoo. And I remember sitting outside of that cafe. There was a cafe down the street from Union Street there in Brooklyn. And a wave of mercy, love, and grace, man, fucking hit me. And it was like a fucking freight train. And I was just like, I accepted it. Because I couldn't believe that my story cared enough that these people like Stephanie Thomas, Virginia Elwood, Anderson Luna, Scott Campbell, all these people there, they care about me and my story. It was an affirmation that I needed to hear about the trauma that I had experienced, you know, or affirming that it was surreal, because that's pretty surreal to be hanging out with these fucking people, you know, and they just want to be around me and help me. And so I was going to go tattoo one of my dear PJ friends at Saved with all of their help while they stood there and gave me all their fucking secrets they could.
So it's like the culmination of everything at that point.
Yeah, it's just fucking overwhelming. And so that's what kind of tattooing means to me, is that mercy, love, and grace, like accepting the virtuous risk, right? But so the weird Deb story. So one of the things that Scott told me to do, he wasn't like this omnipresent mentor. He was just like, reduce variable and meet other tattooers. That's all he fucking told me. So I walked down the street. Less than a mile from here is Don and Deborah's shop, the Yarians, the Eagle River Tattoo. And I just go in there. I'm like, hey guys, so I'm a fucking PJ. And I met Scott Campbell and he tattooed me. I tattooed my legs. Check it out. And I just wanted to meet you guys. And cool. And they're just like, fuck.
You have no idea what you just walked into here.
Yeah. And they're
cool.
like, that's a pretty incredible story. It's just fucking weird. And it's not like they put me off or anything, but that's just a lot to take in. And they were tattooing people. And, but what makes the story even more interesting is Don was a career Army Ranger. So he knows what a fucking PJ is. I mean, how many tattooers would know what a pararescueman are? There's very few, right? Mm-hmm. And so he knew full well what I was fucking saying. And Deborah had never met Scott, but she knew everyone at the Save family. In fact, she was going to go tattoo at Save Tattoo the next fucking weekend in Brooklyn. She had never been there before. Never been there before. She goes there, blah, blah, blah. I come back in. I kind of tuck my tail between my legs, come back in there. Hey, man, just fucking tattoo me then. Like, tattoo my face. I don't care. You know, let's just talk. Let's just
they
talk.
Do not like
and
doing that either, but they're awesome.
But yeah, I mean, that's the way, you know, you want to get involved in tattooing. Well, then go get your whole fucking body tattooed by somebody. And you're guaranteed to develop a relationship, you know. I mean, that's the secret to anything, is just fucking immerse yourself in it. But with yourself at risk, with yourself at loss. Like that's literally your skin's in the game, right? Like, I mean, so that's what I started doing. I started going there and getting tattooed a whole fucking lot. And I kept tattooing. And at that point, Don and Deborah, they're wonderful people, but it's a sacred thing to them. They don't just open that shit up to people. Mm-hmm. And
they don't. And I mean, I'm not trying to interrupt you, but that's actually what made you years ago, when I heard about you, super interesting to me, because Deborah speaks very loudly about it and with poise. She's like, I don't know anybody, anything. This is my gift. This is for my family. Oh, yeah. And it's my tradition, and I'm going to pass it to them. And when Don was tattooing me and he was telling me about you, and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? Because I was like, because I understood like the brethren a little bit, but I was like, this is odd, because I just had been a part of this, like, but I was very intrigued and very interested. And he had nothing but high things to say, but it was just an interesting. Yeah,
it's very unlike them to just do that.
Them,
yeah, and so I think that there was too many fucking similarities. Like Don, Deborah's husband, who's been tattooing over 30 years. Deborah has been tattooing over 40 fucking years. Think about that as a woman, as your sole profession tattooing for, I mean, she is in an elite category of tattooers.
Yeah.
And she deserves that. And so does her husband. I mean, her husband, Don, is an amazing tattoo artist, an amazing street shop tattoo artist. I mean, and he, I couldn't have asked for better circumstances to learn from them. But I mean, so my point was like, well, maybe I lost my point.
You know, one thing that keeps getting brought up is spooky situations, or as I guess I'm beginning to understand it, it's kind of like providence. You know, it's certain things happening and the stars aligning. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, man. So to fall back on that mercy, love, and grace. For instance, you know, I got involved with this diving. I'll just throw another spookism. I'm at Save Tattoo, and this is years later. Like I'm not I mean, I never feel like I'm a bona fide tattoo artist. Like the minute you feel like you're anything, like you're just a piece of fucking shit. You know?
Yeah,
I mean, you know, I mean,
seriously.
literally, you know, like I'm even like how validated is Tom Cruise as an actor, right? But now, you know, I think we'd all agree he's maybe like a little full of himself, right? Not to use a celebrity. I mean, I don't know the fucking dude at all, and I don't follow any of that stuff, but I would think that, you know, maybe someone like that could get full of themselves, and then it's just like, fuck you, man.
Yeah.
As soon as you're like that, but if you're always just like, no, man, you know, like I suck. I'm just trying here, man. You know,
To stay hungry.
yeah, yes, not constantly proving something to yourself, but to treat it as if it is your meditation, like just subconscious effort is what's happening. You
And
know?
even if at the point that you think you have mastered something, then maybe that means it's time to move on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So the diving thing. So like I'm tattooing at Saved, like as a tattooer, like they're like, hey, come here and tattoo. And I'm like, all right, cool. You know, like I'm there and I'm tattooing some people. And, I mean, I'm paying for my trip with the tattoos I'm doing. So I guess I'm a tattooer, right? You know? And so I'm there, but, one of my buddies, a guy named Rudy Reyes. And so as a reconnaissance instructor, there's a guy named Rudy Reyes that I trained. And this guy, very eccentric human being, one of the most capable human beings I've ever met in my life. I was his instructor, and he was a very humble, capable person, and eccentric is an understatement. And he was raised he was adopted. Him and his brothers were adopted by this man who claimed to be the last known Chinese samurai. And his religion was Qigong, or Kung Fu.
Okay, yes. Yep.
Chinese Kung Fu, which is Qi, like Qigong.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, as a dumbass white kid from Dallas, to me, that's Kung Fu theater shit. You know, I mean, that's Caine. That's Caine walking the earth and shit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But here was this guy that he could this is a human being that can literally do like a one-handed handstand on a pull-up bar and just do reps touching his nose to the bar.
Woo, Rudy.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a extremely capable human being. And he'll talk to you. He's like, oh, no, yeah, that's cheese. Like, let me show you this exercise. And he'll show you this exercise. Your hands start dripping with sweat just doing this silly exercise. And you're like, fuck, man, I don't know shit about life. If this guy can talk to me for 10 minutes and do some David Blaine shit on me, man.
Yeah.
And I was intrigued with him, and he was very intrigued with me. We hit it off. You know, we all, what is it? There's three selves: the person we think we are, the person who others think we are, and then the person we really are. Some shit. I don't, you know, spin that however you want. Google it later. But it's like we all see each other through a really odd veil. And I've always been this very incapable physical person. But I mean, here I am. Like when I met Rudy, I was a lead instructor in Marine reconnaissance. And I was like this Shaolin monk mojo fucking trainer. I mean, I walked around with a bag of bones and fucking coral and shit, and I would do shaman shit to you, man. I mean, that was like, I was way into this stuff. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, I was on the Marine Corps triathlon team. I could run 5-minute miles, do 30 pull-ups, you know, swim open ocean miles in under 20 minutes. I mean, I felt I was Olympic caliber triathlete at the time, you know. And, Rudy and I really hit it off physically. I kind of taught him the do's and don'ts of swimming. We would go and do breath hold. I could do free diving out in La Jolla Cove in the middle of the night, pulling ourselves down the chains and stuff out there, you know. And that's cold fucking water, and just do it out in a Speedo. Just go out there and fucking feel it, you know. And we would do cool shit together, you know. And we really enjoyed each other that way. But then, you know, long story short, I had a missing block of time with him. I went on to do pararescue. He did amazing things post 9/11. They made Generation Kill, a movie, which was based off of a Rolling Stones thing. Reconnaissance guys within special operations, especially in the 90s, they were some pipe-hitting motherfuckers. I mean, that's the real deal. And I felt like I definitely was a big part of enabling that. Like I read as many native culture, shamanistic, warrior training things as I could, and applied it to everything I could, you know, from Marine Corps reconnaissance sniping techniques to scout swimmer techniques to combat diving. And I would force guys to do native culture, shamanistic training while doing that stuff. And I poured over literature and books and just poured over the Iliad and the Odyssey, Moby Dick, every fucking thing. And that was my religion. Reconnaissance and special operations was my religion. And Rudy was not only a star pupil, but he exceeded me in many ways. And I was just thankful to share the time and the friendship with him, you know, when all was said and done. Mm-hmm. Those men that I trained are now the sergeant majors of MARSOC, Force Reconnaissance, the legendary fucking dudes in that culture now that are the players, the top of all of that. Were not only my peers, but my students of that time. And so there was a block of time there that I didn't see Rudy for like 10 years. I get this cold fucking call. I'm tattooing in Brooklyn. It's Save Tattoo. And my buddy's like, hey, fucking Raj, it's Rudy, man. I need to fucking hit you up. I'm in Manhattan right now. Where are you at? And he knows that I live in Alaska. I'm like, I'm in fucking New York, bro. And he's like, you're in fucking New York. He's like, meet me here. And so I meet him there, meet this other cat. His name's Jim Ritterhoff. They basically pitched me this deal like, hey, we want to get all of our brothers, man, all the special operations guys, and we want to get them in marine conservation at the elite level, like Jacques Cousteau, Sylvia Earle, Ocean X, like level of fucking ocean conservation. And I'm like, cool, bro. I'm like, what are we doing first? And like, we're going to raise some money, and then we're going to go do a training iteration, and we're going to do this stuff in the Cayman Islands. And I was like, fucking cool, man. And I'm like, well, if you do this, I've got to involve my younger son, Oz. I've got to involve my family. And then things being what they are, you know, you cannot invite an elephant trainer in your living room if you don't have room for the elephant. I got Carrie Elk involved because these are all significant combat veterans. And now we're mixing them with a bunch of hacky sack fucking players. And it's like, you know, we need to be able to, if these guys have fucking breakdowns, or let's have them talk about their experiences, because we want this to be cathartic. We don't want to fucking beat the dead horse about, oh, I'm fucking SEAL and blibbity, blibbity, blibbity. I don't want you to do that, but I want us to speak about our emotions and our experiences, because we need to move past them together. And that's what this is about. Mm-hmm. I want you to take those experiences and let's help heal the earth to heal ourselves. Let's champion the things that can't champion themselves as a way of community and helping ourselves. And so I became a big part of that with my friend Rudy. And now we've got like 12 teammates that we've trained. And that's what you saw whenever you brought up the thing with the turtle thing. It's not just turtles. It's just, it's marine
so
conservation.
Yeah. No. And I can definitely.
Yeah. I mean, and it's as powerful as, so Whitney mentioned earlier, we were talking about this, there's an ABC and NBC had done a documentary on me and my son, Oz, because I'm like, Oz is coming with me on every fucking Force Blue deployment there is, you know, because he's now like the mascot of Force Blue. And, you know, our saying is mercy, love, and grace, right? Like right. With this whole thing. But so they have paired us with the tier one of marine conservation, whether we're on Capitol Hill lobbying for ocean conservation funds and lobbying. You know, because everything's so polarized right now, you won't listen to Tammy, the hacky sack player, the vegan hacky sack player that's crying to you about the fucking dying turtles. But, what that staunch Republican fucking senator will do, he'll listen to a Silver Star recipient talk about how I see the face of God in that fucking turtle and that we need to fucking help these things, you know? Okay, and so that dichotomy is powerful. And what being involved in that program of Force Blue has taught me is the way to healing is dichotomy. If you think you're some tough fucking asshole, well, what's the opposite of that? Right? Go fucking volunteer at a special needs camp for free all fucking summer. Find the middle of your humanity. Where is that? Because we all have it in us. On the outside, we're these polarized people, but that's not the reality of life. People, we have the entire rainbow in us. And I think that we should live our lives to find our dichotomies and live them to the fullest, And that's the power of the Force Blue thing. I think that was the power that drew me to art and to tattooing, because it was like this life of just action and no thought. And then I had to contemplate that and try to express that, whether it's through creativity, through tattooing, through iconography and imagery, or writing a fucking book. Like, I haven't tried to do any of that. And that's the spooky shit of it is I think that grief, or just, our lives, but I can use grief just as an emotion that is easy to talk about, right? So grief has to express itself. All of our emotions have to express themselves. Our life experiences have to express themselves. And it's the same force that causes a flower to bloom. Like, there is a morning, an evening, and a fucking nighttime to our lives. And that's the same thing that a flower does. And for whatever reason, like, I'm just in this blooming aspect of my life. My life has to articulate itself. Like, I'm not me. Like, who gives a fuck about me personally? But my experiences and my humanity have to be expressed through itself. And I think that that's the spooky thing about meeting all these fucking people and having them help me articulate what I have to say, even to yourself, to Crude the magazine or the podcast, whatever that is. It's like, that is God. Whether you want to believe that's a Christian God, a Buddhist God, a fucking Hindu God, whatever the fuck that is life expressing itself. That is my humanity expressing itself through all these means, whether they're technological, through written word, through someone staring at a fucking tattoo, whatever that is the will of God, right? Or just the will of the universe, the will of humanity, the will of consciousness, the will of life aware of itself. Whatever you want to explain that is what it is. But the real fucking spooky thing, when I'm just sitting by myself, is like, I haven't tried to do any of this, man. And I think that's what sustains it, right? Like, because the minute that I try to do this for myself, or that I'm doing this for self benefit, or same thing in combat. And I have to reflect on that, because it's like, I spent so much time just meditating or reflecting on my experiences to try to find the meaning or the value in them. And I found that the only meaning and value in those severe, surreal circumstances is your intention and your resolve. Your equipment's going to fail you. Everything's going to go to shit. But your intentions become very paramount. Your resolve becomes very paramount. Like, for instance, I've gone into other, highly, highly fucking trained U.S. fighters on the ground, and they're completely fucking panicked. I'm not panicked yet. And I'm like, well, why are they panicked? Because they've gone beyond their intentions. Their intentions were to bring this fight, go kill the fucking enemy, come back, maybe drink a Mr. Pibb. Their intentions were not to see their buddy get fucking ripped in half with an RPG, and their weapons get destroyed, and they're out of fucking ammo, and they're getting overrun, and they're fighting hand to hand with these motherfuckers. That's what I'm saying? That's beyond human projection, And so, not that any of us are any better or worse, because I've seen the finest of fucking courageous men in combat shut the fuck down. And no one has the right to judge them, because it's like, that is all within us, Maybe his view of his mortality has changed. He's seen that tiger smile to where it's now he's seeing his fucking son. He's seeing his wife. And maybe this young guy that wants to talk shit or wants to judge that, he doesn't have a wife or son. So it's just like, it's all spectrums of just humanity within there. And no one has the right to judge that, you know. But, yeah, I mean, this expression, this whole expression of it is bizarre. But I think what I was going to say is, like, when a person thinks of self-preservation in mortal combat, everybody's going to fucking die.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a power to selflessness in the face of our own mortality. I think that's what makes people survive. You know, people that become selfish die. And I think that people that are willing to give of themselves at the precipice, they are the ones that live. I read a quote, and I'm going to fucking butcher it, but it talks about the sailor on the precipice of death can only save himself by risking his life, to go for the line, to jump for the rope, you know, to risk his life to save his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's very true in the most dire of circumstances, but even in a more subtle way, turn the volume of that way down. And that turns back to our initial conversation about comfort or discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the same thing. It's just the volume's a little different. But I mean, random acts of violence happen, and I have struggled with knowing that other people were acting selfless, but they were killed. You know, and so, but again, you know, we have to seek meaning, and that's just my humanity trying to express its experiences, you know, through all this stuff, you know.
So I mentioned earlier that I had a question about the things they carried by Tim O'Brien. And in his first story, he talks about the things his friends and fellow soldiers carried with them. Most of it was out of necessity, he says. Guns, food, pocket knives, water. But everyone also had something sentimental that reminded them of home. Did you ever carry anything like that with you?
Yeah. Yeah, we're sitting in my garage, and so I'm really into voodoo and metaphysics, man. You know, I really am. You know, there's if you believe in something, it's true. You know, and that's the power of you know, our will. You know,
Manifestation.
Yeah. But it's silly as hell. It's very silly. But you see that banana? It's a banana. It's just like a weird, like a silly little thing hanging up right there. It's like a stuffed animal banana thing.
On your pull-up bar?
Yeah. I had that in my backpack the whole time as a PJ, like my entire, and so my wife and son sent it to me, I think, on one of my deployments, and I just carried it. I've also carried a lock of my wife's hair that she tied in a little thing. I would keep it in my pocket. I'm just like that. I carry little juju. I don't know. Because it's like empowering, you know, and, the Native Americans used to do the same thing, you know, like, you know, they would, you know, find little things. I mean, even if you want to take something as you know, traumatic as like taking someone's scalp, you know, I mean, like, you know, taking power from things. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things, that I would carry like that. And I mean, all of them had different value. You know, it's like context adds value. Same thing. I mean, just to project that to tattoos, like you could get something that just says, I'm an asshole, you know, and that would be the silliest tattoo. But some of my favorite tattoos, like my younger son, Oz, tattooed me. He just wrote his name. Mm-hmm. And his penmanship is pretty serial killer, man. I mean, let alone his ability to tattoo.
Yeah.
But the context of him tattooing me, that's beautiful, man. Mm-hmm. You know, and so, you know, those things that we carry with us, you know, it's all contextual, you know, that juju has a weight of the context, you know, and I'm trying to think. I mean, there's a lot of things here in this garage, and I feel relationships are that way with me now because, you know, like Scott and Casey and all those guys, meeting them at such a volatile period within my life is a vulnerable time in which they did, and they were such a sledgehammer of catharsis that that relationship is contextual. And so Scott designing the patch for the book cover, you know, where it says mercy and grace, you know, with Scott and Casey and David and those men at that time represent mercy, love, and grace to me. And the willingness for me to accept them into my life, you know, is healing to me. And Scott made a whole bunch of patches. You can look right behind me. These are all conversations of patches that Scott made. And they're just different conversations, that we had here and there. And one of them is accept kindness and grace. But even the cover of the book is a skull with lightning bolts and a scorpion. And that skull with the lightning bolts is God's grace, right? And that scorpion is kindness, because, those things, I heard a long time ago that enlightenment is at the tip of our nose, but we're just too dumb to see it. And that's kind of like scorpion presenting you with kindness or grace, So it's like, those are the things that are powerful. It's the dichotomy.
Roger, this conversation is so, it's a little spooky for me. Just, you know what I mean? Like doing these interviews and having these chats with people. It's like, you seek out these things and you go after them and you go find these people or these ideas. And it's like, you never really understand what you're actually like getting into, essentially. Yeah.
You don't know what's happening. Yeah.
You don't. And it's a spooky conversation in the good sense of like, this is it's pretty real shit, and talking about accepting like love and grace and kindness and other people's like value of you. That's a tough one, and I think you keep bouncing back on that. Like, why do I matter? What about me matters? And it's like, it's hard to.
Yeah. Listening to the affirmations, like listening to the affirmations of it. There's another spooky story that I've got to tell, but there's a guy, I was at a barbecue, and this is just 2 doors down. I was at a barbecue, and they invited me over. My wife and kids were in Texas, and I was here because I had to be on alert as a PJ or something. I didn't have leave or something. And they invited me over, and there was a kind of quiet, brooding, middle-aged athletic guy. And he's just asking me, he's like, hey, so Roger, you just got back from deployment? And I was like, yeah. He's like, did you see combat? And he's kind of asking me, but he's really just kind of asking in a very genuine, but kind of almost offensive way.
Like antagonistic?
Yeah. And so I tell him that I get deep like where we are right now, but I'm not as well, my thoughts aren't well formed, and I'm just kind of telling him these things. And he realizes, he's like, oh shit, real recognizes real. And he was like, hey, listen, man, I'm doing these things called portraitures, and I would love to do one on you if you don't mind. And I was like, yeah, what's a portraiture? And basically what he does is he takes really good photographs, amazing photographs, and then he writes a bio about his experiences with you and then shares those photos. And this is like Guggenheim level shit, And his name's Joe Yelverton, and he's an amazing Alaskan that goes around the state and does portraitures of people. Amazing. And he's so insightful, but real knows real. Like we were saying, like he's been there. And so I didn't know any of this. And so I'm just like, sure, man, let's just do it, And so he's like, I would like to, so I'm like, well, let's just meet at the PJ section. So I get him on base and I show him all the crazy shit there, man. I mean, like doom buggies, machine guns, crazy weird scuba gear. I mean, just really crazy shit. And, I spent like 4 hours with him. I showed him everything that we have, And at the end of the day, he's like, Raj, this stuff's pretty cool, but I don't really give a shit about any of this stuff. He's like, if you got anything cool going on, just let me know. And I was like, hey man, so, I'm tattooing tonight if you want to come over. He's like, you tattoo? I was like, yeah, man. He's like, I'd love to come over and take some pictures of that. And so he came over and started taking photos. He took a couple and he sent them to a friend, and his friend, sent him to the humanities program, and he got like a $20,000 grant just to follow me around and take pictures of me tattooing people. And that was incredibly powerful in a very affirming way. Like it was such a strong affirmation that it was absolutely formative to me standing or sitting here and talking with you guys. Mm-hmm. I think that was definitely one of the dominoes in the spectrum. And one, because he's so talented. 2, he was able to articulate my story. It's very powerful to have, some people are attention whores. Like they'll want to do these podcasts and things like that because they want fucking attention. They're what is that, like self-promoting themselves. But you guys do this enough, and I'm sure you see it with the people that aren't. And hopefully you seek the people that are, it's just like the universe is trying to propagate their story, not them. Like it's just the universe is doing this. And I definitely feel that's the wave that I'm on. And not only you, but Joe was a pivotal piece in this. And basically he took these amazing photos and he was able to articulate with not only photo, but with his brilliant writing. Like he is an amazing photographer, but he is just as talented in his writing. And he was able to articulate my story, and he wrote that story into a small synopsis of his portraitures, which he called The Anonymous Samurai. And his writing was so poignant that it motivated a small culture of pararescuemen to attempt to write as well, that were fashioning themselves after like Hunter S. Thompson, just these really powerful humans with so much humanity in them to write these amazing things. And again, I mean, so that the
ripple.
Yeah, that ripple is what caused me to write the book, right? Because that led Don Reardon, who I was just a cast of characters in him writing Jimmy's book, the PJ that got shot in the head, and Joe being here taking photos of me tattooing men that I've served in combat with that are traumatic amputees and stuff. I'm tattooing him here in this garage for like 14 hours straight kind of deal. And Joe's photographing the whole thing. I have a poem of an anonymous samurai up there, and that's it right there. It hasn't moved or changed from Joe writing that, you know, and that is the whole precept somewhat of Warrior's Creed, the book. And these stepping stones amongst things. And I mean, again, to continue the spooky domino effect, I got involved with the Force Blue. They documented our exploits when we did the Cayman Islands, and we did all these other, when hurricanes come through, they destroy coral reefs, and I can lift up 1,000-pound corals and concrete them back to the subsurface, and the corals saved, and blah, blah, blah. These people were documenting this, and that's a very talented man, just as talented, you got, Joe Yelverton, you got all these extremely, Don Reardon, all these extremely powerfully talented Alaskans that are focusing their attention on me and my story. And again, I'm not asking for it. It's like the universe is pushing this stuff. Bobby Sheehan and these guys started doing these documentaries about Force Blue. They're also involved in all these other humanitarian programs. Once they met me and they met Oz, my son, through Force Blue, they were like, holy shit, man. We got to get Oz and Roger involved in the stem cell project that they're doing. And so we developed this program, and there was a stem cell provider in town that was working out of the UAA mall right next to like Sadler Furniture, this really posh chiropractor clinic. They were doing stem cell treatment there. And so these film producers were like, well, we want to film stem cell therapy and how the FDA's, really kind of hamstringing the American public with regulations with the drug companies and the surgical companies and, not the, industrial war complex, the industrial illness complex that the country's built for itself, And they were wanting to just basically show the benefits of stem cells and use myself and my son as an example. So they treated myself and my son pro bono. And this affected the provider so much, he sold his clinics and he developed a 501(c) with myself called Healing Our Heroes. And this treats combat veterans pro bono with stem cells. And systemic infusion with stem cells cross the blood-brain barrier. It's the only thing that they know that can treat traumatic brain injuries. Mm-hmm. I get my buddy Jimmy Settles involved, who was shot in the head. They treat him for free. And it's like all this stuff is going on. So now we're involved in this thing called Healing Our Heroes, where we are looking at plant-based medicine. So next month we're going to fly with myself and 4 other combat veterans to Costa Rica, and we're going to do ayahuasca ceremony together. And they're going to document it. But it's about dispelling the taboos with stuff, and how do we really treat and care for combat veterans and stuff, but using them as a role model, like everybody can benefit from this stuff, But it's just, again, virtuous risk. Always. Sometimes, I'm just seeing a lot of effect within my life, just again, because I think the universe wants to express this thing. But I don't know where it's going to end, but you can find me at Eagle River Tattoo.
We've been talking a lot about healing. If somebody with PTSD is listening to this right now, what would you say to them?
It's the hardest thing in the world, but you have to find a way to express yourself. No one is a threat to you or your story or your experiences. No one is a threat to your experiences. It's empowering to share them and find a way to creatively express it. Just like I'm on this podcast right now, expressing my humanity and my experiences. They have to find a way to share and express their own, because healing others is healing ourselves. Grief and trauma will never go away, but making the world a better place makes it livable, you know. And there's truly forces of good and evil in the world, you know, and we all live somewhat in the gray area of that. The more severe your experiences, the more severe your expression should be. And, you know, the world is listening. Like, there's some very powerful books. I mean, I don't want to be too tongue-in-cheek, but there's a book I read, The Alchemist. You know, I mean, it's an amazing book. I mean, you read this in high school, you know, but if people haven't read it, that's an amazing story of growth and change and understanding your journey. You know, it's like living causes damage, you know. Living, you don't get something for nothing. And I think that tenderness comes from pain. You know, people that experience loss and grief and trauma, they are the most giving, caring people because they identify with the pain and suffering. And I think that they can find catharsis in healing others by sharing their stories, because their stories have value. All of our stories have value. Find a way to get that vibration out there, you know, because the world needs it, you know. It's difficult, you know, it's a very difficult thing. I think, you know, just speaking for myself or speaking for combat veterans, you know, it's just such a cliche thing nowadays to even say that stuff. But, you know, in the times of past, you know, even in the generations that we can see, you know, the Vietnam era combat veterans, the Korean War veterans, the World War II, the World War I veterans, even going all the way back, say, like to ancient times, you know, where humanity, instead of Greece, you know, they had, you know, the people of Greece, you know, they did a couple of things pretty cool. Like they had this, I think it was a law that if a combat veteran was speaking on the corner, it was law that you had to stop and listen to them. Hell, now I'd just get arrested if I stood somewhere and started screaming shit at people. You know, but we do that in different ways now. I mean, the world's changed in many ways, and you know, it is cliche and it's so watered down, you know, to think about these things, but our stories do have impact, and we have to get past ourselves, because we're our own worst enemies. You know, we'll minimize ourselves, you know, like, oh, my story's not as severe as that person, or I'm not as cool as that person, and I can't say it the way that person says it. It's like, who gives a fuck, man? Don't judge yourself, you know, express yourself, because that's the way the world works, you know. Try to lose yourself, you know, to find yourself, you know, find a way to express it, you know, because the world's listening, and our time is so limited on this planet, you know, and you know, we can blame others, we can blame things. I remember I used to be really angry at the world and the circumstances of, you know, having a special needs son, and just the injustices, you know, that you see there, you know. But there's an immense beauty in that too. You can champion those things, you know, and you know, you don't have to be Mother Teresa or anything, you know, but connect with your humanity, because that pain is a lot of healing waiting to come out, you know. And all you got to find is a way to share it, you know, make that mashed potato mountain.
Well, this has been unbelievable, Roger. I think this is easily going to be the longest Crude Conversations podcast that I have ever recorded.
Well, you can edit, man. Do whatever you want. Edit the shit out of this thing.
I
man.
think that's
no.
in one of the best ways, though. Like,
Yeah, no, this is great.
This has been beautiful. Like, I can't really think of another way to. Yeah, I feel really honored to sit and speak with you and share space with Cody too. I mean, it's really incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm honored, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, and thank you for, I guess, help spread the vibrations. You know, I don't know what to say. Yeah, I just I feel thankful to people even listen to me.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, right on.
For more information about how you can support local grassroots journalism, go to www.patreon.com/Crude Magazine. Crude Conversations is written, hosted, and produced by me, Cody Liska, for Crude Magazine. Music was produced by Alcoda Beats.